across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very, very good morning to you. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and boy, have we got a lot to talk about today. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, thank you very much indeed for your company. Don't forget, if you missed anything from the show, missed anything from yesterday's show you'd like to have a look at, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, of course, we're going to be talking about the violent disorder erupting in Belfast overnight after a Sudanese asylum seeker was charged with attempted murder over a sickening knife attack. The suspect had been granted leave to remain in the UK in 2023 after entering across the border from the Republic of Ireland, prompting more questions about asylum system loopholes. He's going to appear in court today. Meanwhile, a court has also heard in the UK that a teenage girl, a 17-year-old, was raped by 4 Afghan nationals after being lured to a home and plied with vodka. It's almost like the stories just keep coming and coming, don't they? Now, I suppose what I want to start with today is, well, was last night what happened on the streets of Belfast, with a bus being torched, with homes being firebombed, cars, a police car, also a Middle Eastern supermarket on the streets of Belfast, families, largely ethnic minority families, being taken to safety in secure vehicles by police after some of the masked thugs who decided to go onto the streets last night basically knocked on doors, smashed in doors, door to door, to find, they said, the foreigners. Was that predictable? It was certainly predicted, was it not? Many people, yes, including Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, UK leader, has actually been warning about what could happen with the pure cold rage he talked about last week in response to Henry Novak's murder. A very, very different case, two-tier policing. But the story about what happened last night is about the subject we've been talking about for years on this station. I've been writing about for years, even as a newspaper political editor, and that is mass immigration, in particular mass illegal immigration, the arrival of tens of thousands, indeed hundreds of thousands of undocumented, largely young men of fighting age from war-torn countries of, yes, as one MP in the House of Commons yesterday referred to the discomfort of the Northern Ireland Secretary, Hilary Benn, alien cultures. That is why many people suspect we have been seeing a growing spate of not just murders, physical assaults, violence and sexual violence, particularly against women and girls in this country, from those who've arrived in this country from war-torn places, from where we know nothing about their past. But it is also why many suspect we saw the horrific scenes in Belfast yesterday. Now, a 30-year-old Sudanese man has been charged with attempted murder and will appear in court today. And that means that we can't talk specifically so much more about that case. But the fact that we now know that this is a man who arrived in this country from the safe country of Ireland, having arrived in the safe country of Ireland from the safe country of France, and probably having arrived in France from another safe country, who are we kidding, on his way from Sudan. The fact that this man was granted 5 years leave to remain after just a few months here perhaps tells a different story. And it tells us a story about how we simply don't know who is in this country. We simply don't know whether the people who are in this country, who've arrived from these methods, these routes, whether on a boat, whether on a lorry, whether through crossing a border on a bus from Dublin, whether they are people who are going to be a danger or not to our society. And that's the issue, isn't it? That we don't want people who are a danger to our society coming here. We've got enough of our own. We've got enough of our own thugs, the ones who were masked last night, tearing up the streets of Belfast, destroying cars, destroying homes. We've got enough of them of our own. We don't need to import new ones. But who's to blame for this? Is it, well, of course, the thugs on the streets last night? Yes. Is it the far right, the Tommy Robinsons, calling for the whole of the United Kingdom last night to hit the streets following, he says, yet another invader attack on our people? It's time, he tweeted to his many, many followers. More than 6 million people viewed that tweet. Is he responsible? I'd say, yeah, in large part he is. But our mainstream politicians who have been calling out the issue of illegal migration for years, who have been told again and again they're just racist, xenophobic bigots, they don't care about the poor and the downtrodden from the other countries, are they responsible? No. They are part of the solution, not part of the problem. And if you are spending your day-to-day attacking politicians who have been rightly calling out this issue for years, for the streets of violence last night, you are also part of the problem. Let's talk about this right now with Conservative commentator Benedict Spence. This time last week, you and I were talking about the Henry Novak case, and you were saying, and I remember very vividly, we talked about people talk about violent protests. There was a big fear because we'd seen on the streets of Southampton some troubled people. People were charged with crimes yesterday in relation to that. And I said to you, look, peaceful protest is much more powerful. And you said something very significant. You said, no, actually, but often, sadly, it is violent protests that work. In the context of what happened last night in Belfast, do you stand by that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's important to say that neither of us would condone it. We obviously condemn it.
No. I always feel like that goes without saying.
Well, the problem is we have to say it because there will be people who try to twist it. There are people right now demanding that various people already condemn it, even though it has nothing to do with them, because otherwise you fail the purity test. But this, I'm afraid, is the end result. We do not, in fact, live in a democracy, but we live in a political system that at least claims to be a democracy. It wears the skin of a democracy. Yeah. Democracy only functions based on trust. If what you have is a system where people say, yes, we're democratic, and then refuse, time and time again, to implement the will of the people, then what you'll get is protest.
Yeah.
If nothing happens in response to that protest, the next logical response is, I'm afraid, so to speak, physical pressure, rather than, let's say, outright violence. Yeah. Let's say a slightly more muscular version of protest. And so it goes on and on and on, because people have been shown, time and time again, that their vote doesn't count, that lobbying doesn't count, that petitions don't count, and, in fact, that peaceful protest doesn't count. This is a response to government, local authority, national authority, and, frankly, also a series of NGOs and campaigners who now craft a lot of policy, being told over and over again, we don't like mass migration, but what we particularly don't like is illegal migration, which I think you could now say is illegal mass migration, given the scale. And repeatedly, the pushback is, oh, that's unfortunate, and then there's more of it. And when these things happen, as they do increasingly regularly, the response is to say, don't get violent now, don't be divisive now, pay no attention to it and maybe it'll just go away. Beyond a certain point, there will be a backlash like the one that we're seeing now. And let's be clear, it's still nascent, it's still small.
It's still Tommy Robinson fanboys.
Or in the case of Northern Ireland, it is, communities that are rooted in a degree of violence and have been for a very long time. But that in itself should be a lesson to people. You can't, in fact, drop people like this into communities like those in Belfast and not expect a response. These are people who fight their neighbours or have fought their neighbours for decades.
Who look just like them and follow pretty much the same religion.
Talk like them over the slightest of things. So what do we think was going to happen in this? This is not a place where they had to put up the flags. The flags were already there to denote this is who we are. And this is the other thing. When there is the absence of state control, state authority, that is to say the police, as there is in the case of Northern Ireland, people can sense that. And what the police do in these situations is they step back because they understand there's no point in trying to arrest this many people. There are too many. They might go in afterwards, but that is the point at which the police are effectively resigning control.
But we see this again and again and again in UK policing.
We do.
Where the police just step back and don't do it. We see it with numerous different protests. Not with others, not with some others, though. Like, we know which ones we're talking about. Interestingly, just in the last couple of moments, the Prime Minister has issued a statement. He said the disorder in Belfast was, in his words, shocking and completely unacceptable. I would agree. No, I would agree on the completely unacceptable. But I don't think it was shocking. No. It was shocking as in it was horrible. It wasn't shocking as a surprise. I think we all thought it was very likely, didn't we? He said it is clear that people were targeted last night because of their background and I will not tolerate it. He also said yesterday he wouldn't tolerate, sort of barbaric, attack on our streets that we saw where a man is still in hospital with horrific injuries to his face, his neck, his eyes, and only alive probably thanks to the wonderful heroism of local people. I've now learnt what a curling stick is. I was saying some kind of bat all day yesterday. We saw saw that video image of the man, the attacker, being literally spatted around the head. But the thing, when the Prime Minister says he won't tolerate stuff, that's, I mean, as I pointed out to him on social media yesterday, I don't know if he reads my messages or not, he darn well should. He does tolerate it. I mean, on the contrary, the Labour government and the Tory government before them, with some honourable exceptions, they basically, their policy was, we are willing to tolerate a certain level of, yes, low-level crime, a certain level of violent sexual assaults on women and girls, a level of assaults on children en masse, grooming acts. We are willing to tolerate a level of violence, barbarity, attempts to change our politics, change our laws, blasphemy laws. We are willing to tolerate all of that in return for living in a multicultural, diverse, open borders nirvana. They have basically said this is a price worth paying, and the people who are the problem are not those committing those crimes or defending those crimes. The people who are the problem are the people going, guys, I think we might have a problem here, because we've got a rate of criminality and a rate of non-economic contribution and social divisiveness happening as a result of people coming from certain countries where many of us would argue our cultures are not very compatible. Let's go with it that way. Is that an acceptable thing for the leftists here? Not very compatible. The fact that Hilary Benn, the Northern Ireland Secretary, was sort of, you could see him sort of taking umbrage yesterday when a Northern Ireland MP pointed out that, we were talking about someone coming from an alien culture. There are an awful lot of people in this country, pretty much on the left, and including the left of the Tory party, by the way, who think that all cultures are equal. They're not. And that, anyone who comes to this country will simply just be, they'll behave like us. The evidence is very clear that that is not the case. I don't know why they persist in thinking that. And then you've had the other bizarre argument I've seen on the left, and you get that, it's the Owen Joneses and others, and so many of them going, well, where was all your anger about this horrific, barbaric killings, on a list of killings by white people, white British people. They're all obsessed, by the way, with the colour of this attacker's skin, or a suspected attacker's skin. I mean, some people may be concerned about the colour of his skin. Most people in this country don't care. They care about the fact that somebody could be in this country who is alleged to have committed a horrific, barbaric crime, who didn't have to be in our country. That's the issue for most of us. But they're pointing out, you didn't write a load of tweets. You weren't calling for people on the streets over these crimes. But we already have our wrong uns. It's like we have our own paedophiles. We don't need to import foreign paedophiles. It's an utterly depraved argument.
And what I would also say is those people saying, well, what about this, what about this, what about this, would be the very first people to stand up and defend the rights of those people if the majority actually got their way with what they would like to do to them. You ask the average person what they would do to the average white paedophile, I don't think the answer would be particularly diplomatic or civilised, shall we say. It would be pretty violent. Yeah. And there are reasons, therefore, why the state has laws against that. These
cases don't get as much attention because we know we have a level of criminality that is born in this country.
And since we got rid of Australia, we can't deport these people somewhere. So
he always takes it there, doesn't he?
No, but this is the point. Once upon a time, that in fact was the default response, was to get rid of these people from society. It's not in fact the majority's fault that no longer exists. We might all agree it's not a good thing anymore. But again, if you were to give people that option, can you find an overseas territory somewhere to dump them? They'd take them very in a second.
Most people would be perfectly happy to bring back the death penalty.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you what you think. Lots of calls already on the board, obviously, but violent disorder erupting in Belfast overnight after that Sudanese migrant was charged after a barbaric knife attack. He will be appearing in court today. What is your reaction? What's your reaction to the reaction as well? I want to hear, especially the Prime Minister, who says that he will not tolerate that violence last night. I mean, no one should tolerate the idea of masked thugs going door to door, firebombing houses, looking for people who are, quote, for what they mean is brown or black. Absolutely, I don't care whether you're doing it because you think someone's Sudanese, whether they're an illegal migrant, born and bred, black, white, Jewish, Asian, I don't care. It is barbaric and disgusting. I don't at any point justify it. I think it doesn't. If you are concerned about mass illegal immigration, which anyone sane should be, and the violence acts that we've seen, this doesn't help the cause because it allows the left who defend this stuff, and they do, because they do tolerate it, because they refuse. If you refuse to take action against someone or people or a policy which enables these things to keep happening, not just happen once, but happen again and again and again and again, you do tolerate. That literally means you tolerate it. Because if you didn't tolerate it and you were, I don't know, in a position of power, like, I don't know, maybe, Prime Minister? Maybe you would do something about it. So, frankly, Prime Minister, do one on this one. But, you know, who is at fault here? Because when this stuff happens on the streets, it means the conversation is about the violence on the streets and not about the actual problem that might have caused that.
Up to a point, yes. But I do think that the increasing normalisation of violence as a response does push the conversation in a certain direction. And that is that the state actually has to take it seriously, because you can't simply have that every time there is a barbaric atrocity like that. You know, this is not your average attempted whatever. This is a different level of violence that we are not used to in our society, and we do not wish to become used to in our society. When that becomes normalised and the response to that automatically is violence, up to a point, yes, they'll be able to condemn that, but you can't ignore it. Long term, you can't just sit there and go, oh, this is fine, this is absolutely fine, because it will grow. Because every time it happens, that is a demonstration, A, that the state is not doing anything to stop the individual initial acts of violence, and does not have the capacity to stop the response to that. So every time it does happen, as bad as it is that it happens, actually it does shift the conversation slowly in that direction, but it does go in that direction.
I mean, my view is, again, as you put on, you know, people have voted again and again. When we weren't asked, first of all, about, you know, mass immigration, legal immigration. We certainly weren't asked ever to, you know, go, yeah, let's have mass illegal immigration and never actually deport anybody. And by the way, Sudanese people are nearly always given leave to remain because they're very rarely actually deported under our current mad system. You know, but when we were asked at the 2010 election, 2015 election, 2017 election and 2019 election and 2024 election, and a small matter of a referendum in 2016, we made it very, very clear what our views were. And every single government that has been elected of every kind since that time has had to have a manifesto that promised to reduce it. And illegal and legal migration very much get, you know, almost combined into one. And they are very different things, and to a certain extent need different policies. But part of the issue is that, you know, looking at a man, the suspect in this case, he travelled from Sudan in 2023. Now, there's been a civil war in Sudan. There was some travelling 2018 to 2021. 23, it kind of really exploded. Some 3 million migrants left Sudan around that time. Most of them, by the way, in neighbouring countries. They're in Chad, they're in Ethiopia, they're in South Sudan. So, by the way, that's where the women and children are, by the way. But a lot of young men made their way. Now, we don't have a huge scale of Sudanese in this country. However, they largely don't get deported. Deportation is virtually none. But he arrived in Paris. He will have paid people traffickers to do that. From Paris, he travels to Dublin because, of course, both EU countries, France and Republic of Ireland. And then he gets on a bus from Dublin up to Belfast in February 2023 and immediately claims asylum. Why didn't he claim asylum in the safe country of Ireland? Why didn't he claim asylum in the safe country of France or any other country he'd managed to get to en route? So we've got an issue of the open border that we've got. We've had this open border between Northern Ireland and the British mainland for over 100 years. I mean, this is long before Brexit and Good Friday agreements. And one of the key issues about Brexit was keeping that Good Friday Agreement deal where you have open, free travel between the Republic and Northern Ireland. But clearly this is an issue, and it's an issue in both directions in terms of migrants. But again, he got granted a 5-year refugee visa after just a few months. Well, why?
Yeah, why? There were plenty of other places that he could have been accepted, and this is where I think lots of people sort of turn around and look at the system, because there will be plenty of people who will make the arguments as to why it is that he was enabled to. That doesn't alter the fact that people don't want it to be the case, and they don't feel that there is a democratic mechanism to reverse that. And I'm afraid, for as long, you know, as for that, there are many predominantly liberal, left-leaning people, plenty of human rights lawyers, etc., who will sit here and say, but this is a moral imperative that we be allowed to do this. People will turn around and say, in a system that describes itself as a democracy and claims its legitimacy from pretending to be a democracy, you should have the right to say, we're getting rid of that system. What people are angry about is that there is very clearly no mechanism to do that.
We keep voting for it, and you keep ignoring us. It's 16 years of us voting for it.
And if there is no democracy, I'm afraid to say, actually, at that point, what are people left with? How can you be surprised when they turn to violence? Because then it is not a dictatorship, it is bureaucratic, it's tyrannical.
Well,
but the point is
we
they
left
don't have
the
a say.
EU because we didn't have enough say, and the technocrats and bureaucrats were doing whatever the hell they wanted without democratic accountability. And that was one of the reasons we left. But and one of the things, someone on the show last week said you would never resort to violent protests, and I said, well, actually, no, I would. 2019, I was like, I would have been ready to get my pitchfork if they had stopped, if they had actually voted in Parliament to stop that Brexit referendum going through, genuinely, I think that would have been justifiable. And what I love about the British people, this is the thing, the British people were incredibly, so calm and dignified. We're like, we'll just wait, we'll get an election, and then we'll tell you. And they told the politicians what they thought of all of that. It's very clear. Pretty much any of the politicians that pushed that agenda trying to undermine it were ousted. Apart from, the likes of Keir Starmer, who I've always said is unfit for public office because of what he did between 2016 and 2019 as Shadow Brexit Secretary. But this is the thing, we've had so many horrific murders on our streets, so many terror attacks could have been prevented because people are in the country able to commit those attacks because we've offered them and their families, safe refuge. It is, I would say, if you look at what happens in the European mainland, what happens in France on a very regular basis, and the banlieue with basically the migrant cities set up around major cities in France. We saw what happened at the end of the
Champions League.
The Champions League, even when they won,
well, yes.
Exactly. But you are in a situation where it is extraordinary that we do not see mass riots on the streets, I think, as a result of some of those attacks and the abject failure of the authorities to do anything about it.
The Abedi family is a very good example of that. These were people who were known to be extremists, and we were invited into this country anyway. Obviously, the key thing here is many of these people who come to this country in the first place, they come from North Africa, they come from the Middle East, because they are being persecuted. There is often a very good... I know that we like to say that all of these regimes are terrible and they have awful human rights record. They do. But there are very often reasons why...
They also persecute Islamist extremists.
They don't persecute people just because they fancy it. There are usually reasons, ideological reasons, religious reasons, and whilst we may sit here and say that's barbaric, there are often reasons why certain people flee here because they know they'll get a better ride than they would in those countries. The Muslim Brotherhood being a very good example. That's something we have to bear in mind here. Those people are here and they do not wish us well.
And again, we'll be told it's not all. No, of course it's not all. It's not all migrants.
No,
it's not even all illegal migrants. Asylum seekers. It's not. But it's too many of them. One is too many. One is too many, and it's been way more than one. Coming up in a few moments, we are going to be talking to Siobhan White. She is the mother of Rhiannon White, who, of course, horrifically stabbed to death back in October 2024 by a Sudanese asylum seeker herself. We're going to get her thoughts on all of this. I do want to hear from you. What is your reaction to the troubles overnight? The accusations about who's to blame for the violence? Are you surprised by it? According to the Prime Minister, it's shocking, completely unacceptable. I definitely say it's unacceptable, but he says he will not tolerate it. I think he tolerates far too much, frankly, and I think that's why we're in the mess we are in. Or is this all down to just masked thugs? I think that's a very strong argument for that. What is your reaction to all of this? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Your calls up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just some breaking news. The victim of the Belfast stabbing, that horrific, attempted murder is what the suspect has been charged with. That victim lost his left eye in the attack. That's what's just been heard in Belfast Magistrates Court. The suspect charged with the attempted stabbing murder of that victim has appeared in court now. The victim was Stephen Ogilvie. He's an NHS radiographer. The man who has been charged and has appeared in court in the last few moments is Hadi Alodid. He is a Sudanese national. He's been remanded in custody for 4 weeks after being charged with the attempted murder of Stephen Ogilvie. And of course, we saw the horrific images of that just absolutely barbaric stabbing attack, an attempt, it would appear, to behead Stephen Ogilvie. And the incredible bravery of passers-by. One man, he's from the front page of the Sun, just jumping out of his van and able to fight off the attacker. Now, the suspect, I say, Hadi Alodid, has been identified as a 30-year-old migrant from Sudan who arrived in the country and claimed asylum after arriving on a bus from Dublin, and he has been remanded in custody. Right, well, let's go to your calls. Roger is in Belfast right now. Roger, good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Julia. You and your guest are talking a lot of sense.
We try.
Unlike the show over here in the morning, first thing, the main BBC show, the guy there, he was not even slightly interested in talking about the cause of this.
Yeah.
He only wanted to focus on the disturbances, and for me to... I condemn that at the very beginning.
Exactly. But also there's a difference between let's talk about why this is happening and justifying it. No, sorry, I don't think any right-minded person is thinking it's absolutely OK for people to put on masks and firebomb houses and cars. And if they think that, then frankly they need the police to turn up at their door, if you ask me. But you need to discuss it, don't you?
Yeah, of course. And I've had family members, female family members, who have been harassed by these migrants. I know loads of people who've been harassed, been followed on the bus. And when I tried to tell this BBC presenter the reasons why these cultures aren't compatible, he wasn't interested in the slightest.
Well, because they were instantly then written off as bigots. You know how this works. Politicians aren't listening. Mainstream media isn't listening. And we know why. What do you think the cause was?
What, the cause of this man beheading?
No, the protests last night.
Well, they're just sick to the back teeth with all these migrants coming here. They've seen what's happened over in England, and they've seen the grooming gangs. They know that hundreds of thousands of young girls have been groomed, and they know all about these ghettos in England where the foreigners are the majority, and they bring in practices like female genital mutilation, acid attacks, cousin marriage, honour killing.
Exactly. None of this was talked about. I remember, being told, chilled girls at school have to be told about FGM. Well, not in my day, because it wasn't a thing.
Yes, I even tried to say to this presenter that throwing gays off the top of the buildings wouldn't be a good thing. But surprisingly, this particular presenter didn't have any sort of comment on it.
Well, there you are. Well, serves you right for bothering, Roger. I really appreciate your call, Roger. Thank you very much indeed. We've got another Roger. What are the odds? Another Roger. He's in Spain, though. Good morning to you, Roger. What do you want to say?
Oh, good morning.
I'm talking to a migrant in Spain, by the way, I'd like to point out.
They're North Africans, but mind you, they're probably a fair percentage of them are Muslims. But all I can say is that let's stretch a point and look at British politics for the past 30 years. Then all I can say is democracy has failed us because, and I say that because the politicians in elections have promised to, yes, we'll do something about immigration, and as soon as they get into Parliament, they forget all about it. That's where democracy in the UK has failed.
Yeah, and those governments have repeatedly been turfed out. I mean, people say, the Tories failed. They absolutely did. And when we discovered how badly they failed, we turfed them out. And Labour are going to be turfed out for exactly the same reason. At some point, someone's got to realise that we'd like them to actually act.
Well, in the last Tory government, they always talked far right, but they legislated far left.
Well, no, can I just say this is the thing. When people talk about far right, there is nothing far right about thinking you should have borders, protected, secure borders of your country, and that people who have no right to be here should not be able to get in and should not be allowed to stay, and certainly shouldn't be put up in hotels and given money by us. This is what everyone thought until 10 minutes ago.
Well, precisely. And the sooner that we get out of the ECHR and the sooner we abolish the Equality Act 2010, then we might be making a smidgen of progress here.
Fingers crossed. Roger, I appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Just to reiterate that breaking news, the alleged murderer, attempted murderer of that horrific barbaric stabbing attack in Belfast has appeared in court this morning. Hadi Alodid, a 30-year-old Sudanese man who'd been granted 5 years leave to stay in this country in 2023, having claimed asylum. He has been remanded in custody at Belfast Magistrates Court for 4 weeks. He was charged with the attempted stabbing murder of Stephen Ogilvie. He's the victim and threats to kill the NHS radiographer and also possession of a knife. The victim of that stabbing, Stephen Ogilvie, lost his left eye in that attack, the court heard. Hadi Alodid has been charged with attempted stabbing murder of Stephen Ogilvie, threats to kill an NHS radiographer on the same day, and possession of a knife. Let's go to a quick break. Do keep your calls coming in. Your response to all of that, 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Up next, we're going to talk to someone who understands the full horror of the impact of violent legal migrant crime in our country, and that is Siobhan White, and she is the mother of Rhiannon White, and you remember was murdered by a Sudanese asylum seeker back in October 2024. She is still desperate to get the Prime Minister and other politicians to listen to her pleas for more action. We'll be talking to her up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. Coming up in just a few moments, we're going to talk to a DUP MP about what's been going on overnight in Belfast. Right now, let's talk to somebody who really does understand the full, real, personal, visceral horror of what it is like to face the horrific violence of, yes, some of the people who've been brought to this country who've no right to be here. Siobhan White is the mother of Rhiannon White, and you'll remember the horrific case where Rhiannon, who worked at an asylum hotel in Walsall in the West Midlands, where she was stabbed horrifically 23 times with a screwdriver by one of the men who was in that asylum hotel, Deng Majek. He has been sentenced to a minimum of 29 years in prison for the murder of Rhiannon White. Siobhan joins us right now. Good morning to you, Siobhan.
Morning.
Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I know you spoke to our reporter Samara yesterday as well, and they played some of that out on breakfast this morning. But that was, of course, before we saw violence on the streets in Belfast. Now, can I just ask you, before we talk about your case and obviously the case that's just been appeared in court this morning, protests on the street of Belfast. We've seen, protests in mainland Britain over the issue of illegal migration, and many of them very peaceful. Lots, the pink ladies and the like outside asylum hotels. Do you think that any protests are justified, including ever violent protest on this issue?
Yeah, I do believe that the protests are justified. What I don't think is right is that the violence that leads out afterwards, because this is what we're fighting against. Yeah. Are we going to stop happening? No, probably not. But now it's getting to this, that the government really need to think. They can't be telling people not to be violent when it's violence causing this.
This is. Do you think this is a not desirable reaction, but a predictable reaction to what we've been seeing on our streets?
Yeah, it's predictable because they're only going to take so much before people start listening to them. And like I said, don't condone the violence because it's a violence that's caused it. But people, what is a silent protest going to do, really? But then
this is the issue, isn't it? Because we've seen protest after protest, and as our callers have pointed out, and we're talking about in the studio, people have been speaking about this. I've been banging on about this in print and on air, on social media. Politicians have been saying it. Voters have said it again and again, and insisted on only electing parties that say they'll do something, but nothing's ever done.
No, it's predictable that violence is the only way. I mean, Dublin, they've gone into a mass thing. It's even in France, it's not been a protest, but you've had asylum seekers being beaten up there because of what they're doing. Again, it just feels like it's the last resort. People are going to lash out.
You don't condone it, certainly. But this thing, in the case of your daughter, this man was arrested. He was charged. He was convicted. He's serving time behind bars. But you are still trying to get the government, the authorities, to listen to you, to take more action. What is it you want them to do further?
Do you know, I want answers because we found out that he was denied asylum in Germany and Italy, arrested in Germany prior to this.
Your daughter's murderer, yeah.
Yeah, why he was welcome into England, and more needs to be done because this needs to stop.
So basically, the man who murdered your daughter in a horrific, frenzied attack, that from a woman who'd only been kind to him, this is what is even more horrific about this, is that because he was in the country and he was allowed to stay in the country, despite basically being refused to stay in two other countries, exactly. Presumably for good reason.
Yeah, this is my argument. It's like, I want to know the whys. I mean, I know the police and everybody tried to talk to Sudan. They wouldn't give any information out. Germany and Italy have stood by the grounds that he said he was 27 on his paperwork. But when he was arrested in Germany for, ironically, kicking off at a train station, he killed Rhiannon at a train station.
Yeah.
Why wasn't he deported.
And this is the issue, isn't it, for a lot of people, that we simply don't understand. I mean, genuinely, I've been covering this stuff for years as a political editor and a journalist. I still don't understand why we think we have to have these people in our country. And Sudan has certainly had a nasty civil war, and there are 3 million refugees. But the vast majority of them are living in neighbouring countries. So why can't the people who are here live safely in those neighbouring countries? Why are they, I suppose a lot of people say, why are they our problem?
They're not our problem, that's the point. But I think with the likes of Starmer and other government members, while they're welcoming him, giving them hotels, HMOs, money, etc., they're laughing at us because they will say, it's been known for migrants to say, illegals to say, oh yeah, we'll come over, they give us money, they this and they that, they get, off at France or Belgium, and the NGOs are helping them with trainers and brand new phones and designer gear. Of course, they're going to take it, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you?
If it's their country, we wouldn't be allowed in.
No.
And if we committed these crimes, Sudan, Afghan, etc., we would be killed on the streets.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, isn't it? In terms of your message to the Prime Minister today, many of the politicians, because a lot of them, they're concerned. Okay, they expressed horror at the horrific attempted murder of this man we now know to be Stephen Ogilvie in Belfast on the streets. You will have seen that horrific video. I'm sure we're not allowed to show it on air for obvious reasons, but many people will have seen it. And again, I don't think you know what you're talking about unless you've seen it. Although I can understand people not wanting to, but. A man is appearing in court. He's been charged with a crime. We don't want to prejudice any trial, obviously, at all. He is a suspect, alleged attempted murderer at this current time. But in terms of the reaction we've had from the politicians, and then the reaction we've had today and overnight to these protests in Belfast, which you and I both are very, very quick to condemn, doesn't solve anything. It's violence as a result of violence. That can never help anything. But are you concerned that politicians often seem to be rather more worried about the reaction to these awful crimes than they are in preventing these awful crimes?
Yeah, they are, because they'll go in and they'll say, oh, don't do this and don't do that, and you can't blame this, you can't blame that. Well, I'm sorry, you can blame these migrants, these illegal migrants that are coming into this country and committing these crimes, because like I've said many times, we have enough of our own people doing this. And while they're coming in and doing this, and I mean, the crime rate, the police, the government, they cannot deny this crime rate has shot up 100, 150% since these migrants have been coming into this country.
OK, really good to speak to you. I really appreciate that. And good luck with your campaign to try and get some answers from the politicians about the man who killed your daughter and what the hell he was doing here. Siobhan White, the mother of Rhiannon White. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk to the DUP MP Gregory Campbell from Northern Ireland about, well, what happened overnight and, well, who's to blame? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk at the Home of Common Sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just to get you up to date, in the last half hour or so, a man has appeared at the Belfast Magistrates Court. He has been remanded in custody after being charged with the attempted stabbing murder on the streets of Belfast 2 nights ago. The victim has been named officially as Stephen Ogilvie. He was an NHS radiographer, He has sadly, he's incredible, very serious critical injuries, still in hospital, but he has lost his left eye, the court heard this morning. The man who has been charged is a 30-year-old Sudanese man named for the first time as Hadi Alodid, remanded in custody, charged with the attempted stabbing murder, threats to kill and possession of a knife. Let's talk about all this right now with Gregory Campbell, MP, who's MP for the DUP in East Londonderry. Good morning to you, Gregory.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Just want to hear your response, first of all, to what we saw on the streets of Belfast overnight. Some horrific violence, firebombing of a bus, cars, a police car, Middle East supermarket, most worryingly homes, and people, masked thugs going door to door in some streets, demanding to find the foreigners, in their words, and people who were of ethnic minorities were being led to safety from their homes last night by the police. What was your reaction to that?
Well, horrific scenes, Julia, and I think everyone will look at those scenes and say, look, they shouldn't be happening. There is anger, annoyance, frustration that the government haven't got to grips with the whole issue of illegal immigration. And while this person wasn't here illegally, it comes in the context of whether it's Southampton, whether it's Southport. There have been a series of issues now, and a number of us have been raising these types of issues, and the government seem to be almost burying their head in the sand, hoping that the latest incident will be the last one, but unfortunately it won't be. We need to get scenes like this stopped, but the government need to address the fundamental problem, which are tens of thousands of people coming to this country, and there's going to be frustration, annoyance and anger, which sometimes spills over like we saw last night in Belfast.
I mean, there's no doubt at all that there were people who were trying to stir up protests. Tommy Robinson yesterday, I mean, it's a post on social media, it had more than 6 million views. The whole of the United Kingdom is hitting the streets tonight at 7 p.m. following yet another invader attack on our people. He wrote, "It's time," then a Union flag. That was actually reposted by Elon Musk, who's got many, many millions of followers. He says, only by protesting in capitals repeatedly and loudly will there be any change. Now, neither of those men are explicitly calling for there to be any violence on the streets, and any individual who does what these young men, they were men, did last night are responsible for their own actions. But do politicians, do commentators, do people like Elon Musk, Tommy Robinson, do they bear any responsibility for what happened last night?
Well, I think I'm certainly trying to be balanced here. I think that they probably don't intend to, but they can. They can lead to people seeing that and saying, well, let's get out on the streets, let's take matters into our own hands. And really, the end result here, Julia, is that at number 10 Downing Street, Sir Keir Starmer has the power to deal with this. I've said several times now in Parliament, if you look at the statistics, the population of the United Kingdom has grown by 10 million in the past 20 years. We used to have 60 million of a population 20 years ago. We now have 70 million. If you have a broadly stagnant economy in that period, which we have, how do you pay for more social housing? How do you pay for the NHS? How do you keep our roads repaired if there are millions more people on the ground and not enough jobs?
And of course, most of those would be legal, given visas, allowed to come here, the dependents of those working. But as we were told for many years, these people were economic benefit to us. And again, we know that those stats are now completely exploded as utterly untrue, as many of us were pointing out for a very long time. Part of the issue, part of the debate that's been going on about this particular suspect who's just been charged and remanded in custody over attempted murder is his arrival in Belfast in Northern Ireland, how he got there. It appears he left Sudan, as some 3 million people have done in recent years, most of them living in neighbouring countries, some travelling to Europe. He travelled to France, got to France, travelled from Paris to Dublin in the Republic of Ireland, of course, completely open travel within the EU, and then travel again across the open border with Northern Ireland on a bus up to Belfast, where he immediately claimed asylum. Why do you think that this man chose not to claim asylum anywhere else in France, where he has open borders, could have easily got to, Belgium, Italy, anywhere he wanted, and why not in France? Why did he not claim asylum in another safe country, Republic of Ireland? Why did he wait until he got to the UK to claim asylum, do you believe?
Well, I don't know, but I think President Macron gave us a clue when he told the British government some months ago when he said, look, your country's too attractive for people. That's why they're all wanting to go there. There were a whole series of safe countries he could have gone to. And if you look at the election results in the Irish Republic just recently, there is a rise in fairly right-wing anti-immigration sentiment in the Republic. And I was thinking this morning, those scenes that we saw in Belfast, if this person had stayed in Dublin when he arrived and not come to Northern Ireland, and what we saw in Belfast on Sunday night had happened in Dublin on Sunday night, you could be seeing the same scenes down there. Because if you have open borders and don't check who's coming in, you don't allow the certain numbers to come. Yes, we do need certain people for skills. Yes, we do need that. But if you have millions of people arriving over a fairly tight time scale, that changes the fundamental nature of the nation state, and it creates problems. And really, Keir Starmer, or whoever takes over from him, is going to have to wrestle with that, deal with it, and solve it.
And there are lots of different things going on here. There's people's horror and distress and anger, I think, and again, cold anger, as Nigel Farage described, our anger over the Henry Novak murder and his treatment by the police, but about the barbaric crime that we saw played out on video. Most of us will have seen that. We're discussing it now. And then there's also the anger and the people have about the fact that this man, the alleged suspect, is in the country. Why is he in the country? Why was he given leave to remain? And then that's related to generally the problem with illegal migration and our asylum system, inability to deport. And then wider than that, mass legal immigration. There are lots of different aspects to this, aren't there? Which do you think is the most important?
Well, I would have said legal immigration some time ago, but, we're going to have to look at visa requirements. If people come here legally and they've come through a whole series of safe countries to get here, we have to say, why is that? Why are so many people wanting to reach the United Kingdom? And even if they are turned on the beaches of France or wherever, they say to reporters, I'm going to keep trying. Yeah. But the question is why? And unless we address that question and say, look, I'm sorry, this is going to stop. We're going to desist and ensure that people who arrive here illegally or shouldn't be here on short-term visas or whatever the reason is, that they are returned. Unless that happens and people see this is not going to be a soft-touch country anymore, unless we do that, this will continue to occur.
What do you make of some of the leaders in Northern Ireland's government? It's almost like dismissing the issue of this man having arrived in the country as an asylum seeker and saying almost immediately in interviews over the last 24 hours that, but this man, he'd been given leave to stay. He had a 5-year refugee visa, so it's a moot point. He was in the country legally. Is that a concern for you, that there is an argument almost that, once someone is given leave to be here, then what are we arguing about? Is it still legitimate for people to say, why the hell was this guy given a reason, a visa to stay in this country legally?
I think it's perfectly legitimate to say if this person was here legally, we have to say, why was he here legally? Yeah. And how many others are here legally? Now, let's just be clear so that we don't get caught into a sort of a maelstrom of accusing loads of people who come here legally.
Very good point.
As ending up trying to behead someone. That doesn't happen. Yeah. But if there are small numbers who do, then we have to take action and we have to make sure that potential lawbreakers that arrive here who could go to other countries don't come here in the future. That's a fundamental question.
Do you believe
that at number 10?
Exactly. And do you believe that the man who is currently in number 10, Keir Starmer, who knows for how long, or anyone who's taking over from him in the coming months, do you believe that that he understands the problem and understands the level of anger at this issue, and that he'll deal with it?
No, I don't. I've seen no evidence to suggest that he does get it, that he sees the problem, the nature of it, and what to do about it. But, you know, hopefully, let's not rule it out completely, but hopefully whoever's in number 10 in the next few weeks and months will realise we've got to get to grips and sort this problem, or else this will be repeated over and over again.
Hope springs eternal, does it not? Gregory Campbell, the DUP MEP. I keep saying MEP, I don't know why. DUP MP for East Londonderry, thank you. I really appreciate you joining us. Benedict Spence listening to all of that in the studio. I mean, very thoughtful comments from Gregory Campbell, but I think, again, expressing just that sort of almost bemusement that many of us feel.
Yeah.
About, well, how the hell is this stuff allowed to happen?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, is that, again, throughout this, we have to sort of, and he did the same thing, where you sort of have to qualify it by going, and of course the majority of people do not behave like, which is fine. We all understand that it's not the majority, but the point here is, what is the critical number of deeply
What's the
horrific,
acceptable number?
violent... Exactly. What is the trade-off for that we're getting? Because at some point, we're going to have to say, and people are saying this now, should there in fact be less people coming into the country, being allowed to stay in the country, simply as an odds game? Because clearly the odds do not favour the innocent members of the public.
I quite like Trump's view. I didn't like him when he did a ban on Muslim countries. No, unacceptable. I'm sorry. But when they're literally going, do you know what we want? Don't want anyone from these countries, because frankly the odds are really bad.
Yes.
You're unlikely to be an economic benefit, and you are likely to be a problem. I think
Sudan,
that's
of which is one of them.
Sudan is absolutely one of them. I think that is a perfect... We play the odds in our daily lives all the time. It's about the odds of someone from a particular class or group of people, whether it's, shall I let this man look after my young baby? No, most of us prefer a woman to look after our young baby in a nursery. Why do we do that? Because we're playing the odds. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. That is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. This is Talk, the home of common sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's fast approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Coming up in this hour, we're going to talk about that violent disorder in Belfast overnight after a Sudanese asylum seeker was charged with attempted murder over a sickening knife attack. He has appeared in court. We'll give you some more details of what was said in court. He's been identified as Hadi Alodid, 30-year-old Sudanese man who had been granted leave to remain in the country in 2023. We're going to be talking about that and a few other stories as well we'd like to get to, but I think we can all agree that this is absolutely the dominant story. Also, just the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has issued a statement today saying the disorder in Belfast was shocking and completely unacceptable. He said, "It is clear that people were targeted last night because of their background, and I will not tolerate it." I absolutely agree with him. We should. It's unacceptable, and we should not tolerate it. However, I do worry he does tolerate an awful lot of the things that happen, which mean that thugs, and yeah, if you're going out doing what people in Belfast did last night, did in your masked and your firebombing and you're attacking the police and you're going door to door demanding to get migrants out, yeah, you know what? Yeah, you absolutely should not be tolerated. But, and the only reason I say but at that point is that there are not justifications for that, but there are reasons for that. And maybe the Prime Minister should stop tolerating the things that are causing those thugs to go on the streets. Although I would never, ever, ever say it is justified or acceptable for them to do that. But it may well be a predicted, and some would say predictable, outcome of the policies that are pursued by this government. Before we get to all the talk about the violence there, let me just introduce you to Conservative commentator Benedict Spence, who's joining us today. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Got more details about what has happened in court today. Hadi Alodid, he is the Sudanese suspect who has been charged with attempted murder, that horrific case where it appeared to be an attempted beheading in the street. Hadi Alodid appeared in court, Belfast Magistrates Court, this morning in the last hour. He is 30 years old. He's a Sudanese man. He was charged with the attempted murder, threats to kill and possession of a knife in relation to that attack. Now, the victim has been formally named as Stephen Ogilvie. He's an NHS radiographer. We also heard that the victim is still in hospital with severe injuries to his head, his face and his back. He has lost his left eye, very sadly. It's extraordinary. I think we can all agree that he's even still alive, given the video attack that we saw, video of that attack, pulled off by very brave people running to help him, and we should all pay tribute to them. Now, there was, for some bizarre reason, discussion in Belfast Magistrates Court today about a possibility of bail. Hadi Alodid, you'll be pleased to know, has been refused bail. A detective told the court there was a fear that the case would lead to significant public disorder if he was released, due, she said, to the strong public feeling about the incident. The police, they said, strongly opposed bail on the grounds that not only is Alodid charged with an extremely serious offence, it has garnered serious media attention, and that if any further offences were committed while on bail, they would be serious and unpredictable in nature. The applicant also not being a local man, being from Sudan with links outside the jurisdiction, there were also fears on that count. And they also, the court was also told by the detective that he may fear for his own safety, also fear a possible long custodial sentence if convicted, and therefore be likely to flee. Now, the defendant did not give any response in court. The district judge at Belfast Magistrates Court, this is Stephen Keown, he said the risks were, quote, far too great and would be unmanageable by any bail conditions. So bail was refused due to the risk of reoffending, risk of harm to the public and risk of public disorder and risk of flight. Hadi Alodid is due to appear in court again in 4 weeks' time. Now, the detective also, this is an interesting bit of information from when the arrest occurred on Monday night. The police were called at around 10:30 p.m. The detective told the court the defendant said, "I've killed someone. I don't know if they are dead," while in hospital receiving a treatment for a hand injury he sustained. The defendant also told medical staff, "I will kill you." This is what was heard in court this morning. The detective said when the police arrived on the scene, they found the defendant armed with a knife at the scene, removed him from on top of the victim. And as I say, she confirmed the victim has lost his left eye. Look, this case is sub judice. This man has been charged. He has appeared in court. We do not want in any way to prejudice any future trial, despite the video we have all seen. Benedict Spence, it's a horrific case. Some of that detail, also pretty shocking.
Oh, deeply shocking. And, you know, I think that it's entirely understandable, as in the case of the Henry Novak murder, why it has prompted, shall we say, some very visceral responses from people, because actually this is not, even as a society has become more in tune with quite extreme violence, this is still a level of extreme violence that we are A, not used to, and B, do not wish to become normalised. I think that that needs to be borne in mind when you see people acting very angrily in response. It's because they do not want the state of play to be violence on the streets being normalised and authorities turning around and saying,
normalising it by going door to door and firebombing houses.
Well, that's a very specific response in Belfast. And what I would also say is just if you were somebody going about your day and thinking, I might behead somebody, there are perhaps two really bad places in Europe that you might do that. One might be the Balkans and the other wouldn't be Northern Ireland. And I just think that, you know, this man clearly was not thinking this through, shall we say, because that was
suspect.
This was an incredible for this sort of thing to happen in this part of the country. This is the part of the country where they didn't have to put flags up to demonstrate their feelings about identity. They were already there because they pick fights with their neighbours who look like them, talk like them, walk like them, and have lived side by side for hundreds of years over tiny things.
Violent protests. Again, as I said earlier, it is very clear to me that if you put on you put your hoodie up and you put your mask on and you go out onto the streets, ready to set fire to bins, to push them into buses, so forth. If you go door to door, trying to pull out anyone you think is a foreigner because they were going to apparently houses of multiple occupation and young children having to be led to safety. You know, you're a thug. You're no better than the people you claim to be protesting about. However, there are also, I think, millions more people who would go onto the streets, who would protest 100% peacefully. And we have seen those protests, and I think very admirable protests outside asylum hotels, the Pink Ladies and others, saying, look, we are not violent, we're not extreme, we're not far right, we're not bigoted, we're not racist. We just want our women, our children to be safe after a whole spate of very well documented of sexual assaults and rapes by asylum seekers and illegal migrants living in those properties. It is possible to protest, and it is possible to get people to pay attention to you and to listen to you by peaceful protest. Those people who are being violent, they stop law-abiding people. It's like, look, like the Unite the Kingdom march. Now, I'm not a big march. I've gone on a few marches in recent years because there's been the stuff worthwhile marching about. I know lots of people who went on that Unite the Kingdom march that Tommy Robinson organised, the first one. Not so many on the second. The first one, very peaceful. If you actually look at some of the speeches that were made, some really, in my view, stuff I don't want to be remotely associated with. I've been trying to explain to people who think that Tommy Robinson is on their side. Tommy Robinson is on the side of Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson is on the side of Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who he really is. It's the only person who's on the side of him. When he sends a post like last night or yesterday afternoon, 6 million people saw this. It was then also promoted by Elon Musk. He wrote, the whole of the United Kingdom is hitting the streets tonight at 7 p.m. following yet another invader attack on our people. It's time. It's time for what? I mean, it's time for what? He's not explicitly calling for violent protest. I think he knows what is likely to happen. He's people who carry out violence they are themselves responsible. Here's the thing. I think, there are lots of people like me, law-abiding citizens, who are concerned about this issue, who want this dealt with democratically, who want this dealt with peacefully. Not just this violence, but mass uncontrolled immigration from, on the boats, etc. But we don't go on the streets because we are afraid that people like that will turn it to violence. What we need is a movement that doesn't have Tommy Robinson involved or Elon Musk. It doesn't have the thugs in masks. If you're wearing a mask, by definition, I don't want to be on a march with you. We need to have people who are on the streets peacefully saying, up with this, we will no longer put.
It's not going to make any difference. My views on this I've made quite clear. I don't actually think that just going on a march and saying, down with this sort of thing, careful now, actually has any real impact at all. It is only when things start to escalate and get bad. I mean, let's take examples throughout history. Let's take the civil rights movement. Is it the peaceful marches that lead to change, or is it the assassinations that lead to change, and then the implicit threat that violence would break out as a result?
The suffragettes had to resort to violence.
Exactly.
The
what
ANC
about when people talk about Gandhi? Actually, what was it that led to Indian independence? Was it Gandhi, or was it the implicit threat of interethnic violence and the fact that the British said, this is no longer economically viable, you guys sort yourself out? It was nothing to do with peaceful protests. You can signal to people, but that's the first step. The Arab Spring, it's not people saying, yes, we're all happy and peaceful in Tahrir Square. It's, oh, the army have put their guns down, and actually there's a chance now that there's going to be a military coup, and, oh, here we are a year later, and it is the army in charge. That's always the case. What started off as a peaceful protest in Libya ends with Gaddafi being murdered in a ditch. That's actually how these things go. And this is not me saying that's a good thing. Yeah. What I'm saying is actually
that's just a reality.
Democracies that do not follow through with the democratic process, that ignore that, ultimately leave their people no option. The option is either dictatorship, we just tell you what you're going to do and you go along with it, or people push and push and push in different directions.
A lot of people
until they find
feel
what breaks.
We have told you again and again at the ballot box. We have told you again and again in opinion polls.
Yes.
We've told you again and again when we've written to you. We've had peaceful protests, and you refuse to listen.
Yeah.
You can at the same time.
Yes.
You can condemn the violence at the same time as also condemning the events that have been allowed to happen over years against the express wishes of the British people again and again. Which has not justified but has caused and led to that violence.
Yeah, democracy relies on trust, and it relies on peace as a result of that trust. A great example of this is Viktor Orban in Hungary, who everybody in the European Union said, oh, he's basically Putin Mark II. He's an awful right-wing fascist, this, that and the other. What happened when he lost an election? He went, well, off I go then. And there was the peaceful transition of power because he understood, I've made promises that perhaps I haven't kept to the electorate. It's time to go. What we have in this country increasingly is a situation where the nice people go, don't do that, don't vote for that. Oh, you have voted for it, we're just going to ignore that. Oh, you don't matter. And that's when you get things like Brexit, because people turn around and go, you're not listening. The democratic system isn't working. Well, we need to do something to change that.
But the key thing about Brexit, Brexit doesn't work. Okay, not when Boris Johnson put, immigration, limiting immigration from the EU and replacing it on a mass scale from people from the Indian subcontinent and from Nigeria, which is what actually happened. But this is the thing. That wasn't as a result of Brexit. That was a deliberate policy change.
Yes.
And the whole reason why he had to be ousted, among many other things, Partygate and all of that and his failures, and why the Tories were ousted in 2024, is because we now have governments that are accountable to us. We will throw you out. You don't do our bidding, we will throw you out, because you can no longer say, well, what can we do? The EU won't let us.
It's all Europe's fault.
This is the thing. And what is extraordinary, the more these politicians still think, what can we do? The courts, what can we do? The European Court of Human Rights, what can we do? The asylum rules, what can we do? Well, you know what you can do? What with being a democratically elected sovereign government, you can change the rules. You can opt us out of courts which stop us from actually protecting our own borders and keeping law and order in our country and protecting ourselves from people who trying to behead people in the street or raping 14-year-old girls. I mean, you can do it. That's the whole point. That's why we voted for Brexit, so that you lot are accountable to us. And if you ain't going to do what we've told you again and again and again to do, you'll be out. Which bit of this do they not understand?
Well, I suppose the acid test here is going to be... Listen, I'm not a reform supporter or anything like that, but we've had successive governments, coalition, Lib Dem, Labour, Conservative, fail to do what they were told to do. We now have a fresh party that's come out of nowhere that there's a decent chance it might get into government. That will be the acid test. If it gets into government, does it do what it was elected to do?
Or is it able
does
to
it
do
not?
it?
And I tell you what, if let's hypothetically it gets into power soon and it fails to do that, the fury that people will demonstrate, that is deeply concerning, and that's why it's a very crucial moment, if it ever happens.
That's a very big worry for me. Now, it's interesting. Nigel Farage, I think completely unfair, although, again, I think he walked into it, but I think he did it deliberately over the Henry Novak case. He didn't personally condemn protests. Again, there but not his responsibility to condemn him. He didn't call for them. He didn't, you know. So I think, and again, the left is very big on just, I mean, frankly, they stub their toe or, you know, or drop the soap in the shower and they blame Nigel Farage for it. So it is absurd. But Richard Tice has been giving a press conference. He's the deputy leader. He was obviously on the show already this week. He condemned the violence in Belfast. He's, of course, their business and trade key spokesman. He said, asked if he condemned it. He said, of course, we always condemn any violence, violent protest or whatever. It's completely unacceptable. Protesting lawfully, peacefully, respectfully is very different from taking part in violence and criminal activities. He's urged calms and said, let the police do their job. Now, what is interesting, as reform have come into this, all over social media, people are pointing out, oh, well, if you think reform's the answer, it's a small point that this man, this suspect, Hadi Alodid, he arrived in Belfast from having taken a bus from Dublin over the Northern Ireland-Irish border back in February 2023. We understand a few hundred arrive every year on that route, maybe more than that. We don't know. Part of the problem, I would suggest. This man having travelled from France, having travelled originally from Sudan, how did he get to France? Which other countries could he have chosen? Why did he choose to come to the Republic of Ireland and immediately make his way to Northern Ireland? That is one of the big issues. He was then granted a 5-year refugee visa back in September, just a few months later in 2023. So you'll never guess who, a lot of people are pointing out, who was at the Home Office in September 2023. Two rather key figures in reform. Suella Braverman was Home Secretary. She was sacked 2 months later, interestingly. Robert Jenrick was Immigration Minister, also actually Tory Chris Philp, who's Shadow Home Secretary. He was also at the Home Office then in a more junior role. Now, you know, the defence and reform, I think Suella's already put out defence, Suella Braverman saying, you know, look, I was speaking out about this, saying we need to leave the ECHR. I was saying it publicly, I was saying it privately, and I got sacked. That, I think, is a reasonable defence. Yes. Robert Jenrick has claimed, you know, that he resigned later on over the fact that the Rwanda bill and that he wasn't going to achieve anything. I mean, there is an issue that has been a big issue in reform. That, you know, you're taking a load of people who are actually, a lot of people's minds, because they're Tories, they're tainted with the worst years of this mass illegal immigration. Yeah. It could be argued by them, we were the people trying to stop it, but we weren't able to. Yes. That's their argument, not mine.
It's a justified point to make, and I think that it's right, therefore, that they are asked repeatedly to make sure that we're clear actually where it is that we stand on this, where they stand on this, and why they made those decisions. Now, I understand when people turn around and say, listen, I was a part of the machine, I was trying to push back against it, and I had to resign. To be fair, both of these people have made this decision based on you know, that fact and other facts. They've jumped ship because they felt that things weren't going for them. You could, I think, also make the argument maybe for personal advancement, but that's sort of, you know, that's all bound up in politics. But, you know, equally it is as important to take Kemi Badenoch to task on this. Because one thing I would say is that the OGs in reform, I think, have got actually pretty consistent lines on this. Nobody could sit here and say, oh, Nigel Farage is famously easy on migrants or anything like that. Zia Youssef, I think, has been pretty good at the messaging. Frankly, I think he's come into his own. But I am curious to see, actually, what the Conservatives themselves now say about this. Because if they are to stand any chance of a comeback, and I don't think that they're dead, lots of people seem to think they are, but
I don't.
Give it enough time and anything can come back in this country, then that is going to be a crucial part of it. The break with those years under which they basically went along with everything New Labour had handed to them, and what is coming now. You may as well have had
Tony Blair in government.
You might as well, because I tell you what, if people are worried about reform and the ex-Tories and that they might not be honest, you'll need the Conservatives to keep them honest. So that's an important thing to ask.
Absolutely. But, I mean, it is extraordinary that so much of the debate today is about, you know, oh, who's to blame for these people on the streets? And you know, the idea that people expressing outrage about an outrageous attempted murder, which we've seen played out on the streets ourselves on video, people expressing outrage about that, demanding action, condemning the policies and the people pushing the policies which have enabled that act of violence to take place, that they somehow are the people who are the problem. Yeah. That is why I think the point where people, you know, I mean, and that it was interesting. And again, how many people were busy yesterday on social media and in politics, including in the House of Commons, Hilary Benn, when he made a statement just before we went off air, before I left before 1 o'clock yesterday. He's the Northern Ireland Secretary, policing the language, policing our feelings, just like they did after the Henry Novak body cam footage emerged, telling us what we are and are not allowed to feel, to think and to say, and to act on. Now, here's the thing. There are laws about what you can say and what you can do, but there aren't laws about what we feel. And I think that anyone who is not feeling appropriate levels of rage and horror at these crimes, and again, this attempted murder, this attempted beheading, this is not a one-off, people. Everyone knows that. If you're not feeling that, what is wrong with your moral compass? And why are you not examining why it is that the policies that you support because you think you're a good, nice left-wing person who cares about, kumbayaing anyone who wants to come across to the UK who claims to have a hard luck story, why your policies are leading to, we spoke to her earlier, the likes of, Rhiannon White being stabbed to death in a frenzied attack by a Sudanese migrant. We spoke to her mother, Siobhan, earlier. Why we've got so many rapes and sexual assaults. Otherwise, why are these things still happening if your policies are so nice and good and right? Maybe you should do a little bit more soul searching about your motives and the policies that you support, rather than blaming everything on the likes of Nigel Farage or the Tories.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognise, because there are a lot of media acolytes of the regime, if you like, the system in which we have in place, who took the first opportunity to say, Nigel Farage will be condemning this, won't he? Nigel Farage could disappear tomorrow in a puff of smoke, and the anger wouldn't dissipate. He is very, I think, knowingly latching onto a lot of it for political reasons. That's actually fine. You can do that. You have to, you have to use people's feelings ultimately in politics. But if he and Reform, if he and Reform disappeared tomorrow, the anger would not disappear. And this is the point, actually. These are normal human reactions.
They should be really scared
and
about
they should be, because
if Nigel Farage disappeared, they should be very scared about who would replace him.
The very existence of an insurgency to Reform's right and restore, the fact that it has just emerged, and it is polling not inconsequential numbers in terms of taking points off Reform and the Tories, the very fact that that has emerged at all, like we've seen in Italy with Fratelli d'Italia and Meloni, and like we saw in Germany as well, the far right actually comes across on the right-hand side of an insurgent party. If you get rid of that insurgent party, there's nothing to stop that. And if people feel justified in their anger, which I think actually a lot of them are perfectly justified, and you don't offer them solutions, you just offer them shame and silence, sooner or later the nightmare comes to you, and you can't avoid it. And the far right that you've been talking about crossing Europe, it arrives after a while.
It will actually exist. And again, we need to stop talking about the idea that having secure borders and not allowing any Tom, Dick or Harry who wants to come to our country, we don't know who they are, who could perfectly easily be in a neighbouring country from whichever country they've left and could have claimed asylum in any other safe country en route, that those people have a right to be here. And if they don't have a right to be here, why they are still here. It is not far right for those people to be tagged, locked up, removed from the country or prevented from getting here. None of those things are remotely right-wing. It's what any sane, normal country would do. And by the way, it's what every sane, normal country did do until very, very recently, before we became a suicidal Western civilization where we invited in the people who will destroy the very tolerance and liberal views that and systems that have actually got us to be a place where, what a surprise, people want to come here rather than travel to, I don't know, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, or wherever. They come here for a reason, and we are busy destroying the very reason they actually want to come here in the first place. The stuff that has given us the freedoms, the tolerance, the economic benefits. Doesn't feel like it all the time, but actually, if you want to look at the number of basket cases there are around the world, we're not doing too badly. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. A violent disorder erupting in Belfast overnight after a Sudanese migrant was charged over this barbaric knife attack. He's appeared in court this morning. What's your reaction? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls to charge at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. We've got PMQs coming up at midday. I mean, I would be flabbergasted if some aspect of this story, obviously we've got a charge, and so that makes this particular issue sub judice, this particular case, but I would be flabbergasted if this did not come up at PMQs. Stay tuned. We'll get your calls and your messages up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:29 is the time. This is indeed a Talk. Let's get straight to your messages and your calls. Just a couple of messages. First, Sean says the ultimate responsibility for the riots last night in Belfast rests with the politicians. Starmer knew from day one that immigration and asylum was an incendiary issue. He chose to mask the problem rather than deal with it and brand everyone racist or far right if they objected. Sean, I think you nailed that. Jack says multiculturalism doesn't work. I know, Jack. I'm beginning to think, Jack, that diversity isn't our strength as well. Who knew? Clem says someone tried to behead another person and everyone seems more concerned by the language used in the aftermath. Exactly. Callum says, I understand people being angry, I am too, but putting a torch to your own community is not the way to go. Hear, hear to that. Peter says politicians and the media created this. Let's go to Matthew, who is in Bolton. Hello, Matthew.
Yeah, morning, Julia.
Morning. What do you want to say, my love?
Yeah, I'm disappointed with the response over in Ireland, to be fair. In effect, the press conference that was held yesterday, you know, from Michelle O'Neill.
Yeah.
I just thought I mean, it's the same response as we've had here to any disorder from.
Yeah, in fact, she used virtually the exactly same words which then the Prime Minister here used. I mean, you know, shocking, completely unacceptable. But I mean, it is completely unacceptable.
Yeah, but any normal right-thinking person knows that.
Yeah. We need to be told, Matthew. We need to be told.
Well, yeah. Well, unfortunately, Julia, we probably have a different set of cultural beliefs and standards, and I'm not saying our standards are fantastic, so I'm not getting anybody's case here, but import the third world and you import the third world problems.
Yes. I mean, that's plain for anyone to see with their eyes open.
This is where we're at. So the response from the people in charge, even the PSNI, absolutely shocking, really. So it was just like, you know, nothing to see here, move on, don't share the footage. If the footage weren't out there online, this would have been brushed under the rug, just like Ruda Cabana, just like the Nottingham murders, you know.
And we've seen that. We have seen that again and again. The fight to have actually, you know, even to know the immigration status of any suspected killer. And what do you make of? I mean, again, we've got cases now, sub judice, the man's being charged. But what do you make of the number of people, particularly on the left and on social media, so we're saying, you know, the issue is how people talk about this and stoking up hatred and the fears for. I mean, yeah, I've absolutely got fears for migrant communities who are living perfectly peacefully, who are being under attack by thugs. But focusing on that side of things.
I don't take any notice of them. I would probably ask them, is this guy a brain surgeon? You know, what's his employment status? People are saying about his nationality. Yeah. What was his employment status? Well,
I believe he wouldn't be. I don't believe he'd be, even with that visa he was on, I don't believe he'd be allowed to work, would he? I'm pretty sure not, but I'm sure someone would correct me. Matthew, thank you for that call. I really appreciate it. Ray is in Colchester. Hello, Ray.
Yes, good morning. Yes, well, absolutely tragic events yesterday. Not just the terrible attack, but also the aftermath of that. But really, what we're seeing now is we're heading towards the end part now. We've voted now consistently over the last 20 years for parties that have promised to reduce immigration, promised it and lied about it and done the complete opposite. We've tried the Brexit. Part of it was because of that reason. Quite clearly, all of the parties, it turned out, were pretty much working together to absolutely put a scupper on that. We've run out of road when it comes to voting, it seems to me. And now you're starting to see it as more and more events are happening. The reaction from the public is growing more and more extreme. The great and the good that stand there, rub their hands, give all the platitudes and all the rest of it, while allowing the doors to open and the whole thing continue, are now about to really face, I fear in the next few years, the absolute whirlwind that they have seeded. And they will not be able to stop what's coming. And it's going to be a tragedy.
Yeah, I agree. And again, let's see what. I mean, if you think what happened on the streets after Southport, what happened on the streets in Southampton after Henry Novak, again a different case, but anger at at failure to sort of of police, and then we see what's happened in Belfast. If we have another, say, a terror attack, we have mass casualties. They're foiling these attacks all the time. I would not like to see what's going to happen after that. I think the whole kumbaya, don't look back in anger, well, what are you going to do reaction from governments, I agree, I don't think it's going to play anymore.
Well, also, if you've only got to look at history, and part of what I do is I study history and I study revolutions. Revolutions always follow the same path. There is ever-growing anger, which is suppressed and develops over many, many years. And then there is an incident that is one that comes out completely of left wing. Nobody sees where it's coming from. And that is the spark. And once that spark goes, all of that anger, all of that resentment is let loose in something that is completely uncontainable by the authorities. You then have the revolutionary stage and everything, and I'm afraid it always gets extremely messy very, very quickly. But the politicians we've had for the last 20 years, I find it no coincidence, right across Europe, all at the same period, all the governments decided to open the borders to mass immigration, import people who with little or no skills, something we don't need.
No language skills of any use to anyone.
Basically put onto our welfare system. We have imported poverty. We have imported a third world. And for those then that have done this to us, to then turn around and rub their hands and blame the very people who are bearing the brunt of it, is probably why they're politicians in the first place. But they are reaping what they have sown. And I'm afraid, history has shown where it ends. And normally it ends for those politicians on their lampposts. And I know, because someone's going to say, no one's inciting violence. You're just looking at it as you're looking at history, how it ends in other countries, and that is what happens. We don't want that to happen. Why? I don't understand why can't politicians just listen to what the people are expressly telling them again and again and again. I think the most insulting thing is they pretend that they are and pretend they're going to act and then don't. Ray, extraordinary call. Really appreciate that. You and Matthew, really great calls. Got so many more I want to get to, but just a very quick response to that from Benedict Spence. This is pretty much along the lines of what you've been saying.
Yeah, it is. And it's sort of remarkable how the pattern is going along as everybody can see it, and yet actually the response from the politicians are to just stick your head in the sand. More benefits, more welfare, we promised to do X, Y, Z, and the real problem is global warming or Europe or this, that, and you're all sat there going, we are not complete half-wits. We can't see what's going on, and this is why ultimately
crime's gone down, Benedict. Crime's gone down. Haven't you seen the net migration figures that show that it's going down? I mean, that's what we're being told.
Was it Ray or the chap before who said, well, there would be the attempt to brush it under the carpet? You can't do this anymore. Social media, the fact that everybody's got a camera with them at all times, means it's increasingly hard to just pretend these things don't happen. And even if you try, as we found out with the Henry Novak case, eventually it comes out, because sooner or later there has to be evidence to how it is that somebody just ends up dead or ends up attacked.
Really appreciate your calls. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to take a quick break, then we're going to talk to former police officer Norman Brennan to find out what he makes of the whole thing. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 11:38 is the time. Let's get straight to my next guest, former police officer Norman Brennan, who joins us to talk about what we saw in Belfast. Well, not just last night, but what we saw in that horrific attempted murder, for which a man has appeared in court this morning, has been named as Hadi Alodid, a Sudanese 30-year-old migrant granted leave to stay after arriving on a bus from Dublin after arriving from Paris from Sudan. Norman Brennan, your thoughts on everything that's happened in the last few days?
Shock, really, but no surprise. It was as shocking as it actually was seen, the dreadful knife attack in Belfast. Someone could well have been beheaded. Yes, there's been an arrest. But let's just talk about what the real issue is. The government has a duty of care, any government, to protect our borders and protect our streets. And I've been in policing and law and order for almost 50 years. I've never seen our streets and borders so unprotected. And about 5 years ago, I kept on getting contacted by police and others saying, Norman, we can't tell the public, but many crimes across our area, rapes, murders, stabbings, indecent assaults on children, are being committed by migrants that should never be in the country in the first place. And I think the public have now seen it. And whilst we've got disorder, we haven't got civil disorder. But my warning is this, and I deal with homicide, gun and knife crime, perception of crime, realities of crime, right across Britain. And I'm getting a feeling that unless this government get a grip, and I don't think they will, we won't just have disorder, we will have all-out disorder across Britain. And you can't lock tens of thousands of the British public up, because unless the government get a grip, Julia, that's what's going to happen.
And so many people are warning of this and warning of protests expanding. And the reality is that any politician who warns of this, like the Nigel Farages in relation to the Henry Novak case, but he's been warning of the growing anger over these migrant cases, these alleged this alleged attempted murder by this migrant, Hadi Alodid. They are then accused of stirring up that hatred, actually basically encouraging the violence. Do you think that is true?
Well, what people are saying is the truth. Now, if the truth is upsetting people, well, it's about time the truth was told. Over the Henry Novak case, it was quite amazing. Perhaps the wrong questions were being asked for the right reasons. But I think it's exposed the pressures that policing are under. And I know policing because I speak to them daily, and I know them. And I know many officers are frightened or fearful or avoid stopping and searching young black suspects. You may have called recently or recall recently, Julia, that the government said knife crime is down. Well, they muck about with figures. Let me tell you that stop and search is down from 1.5 million to 500,000. So, of course, knife crime would have dropped.
Because you're not finding, you don't look for them, you don't find them. Ta-da! The figures are great.
If we kept up the stop and search, knife crime would have absolutely increased.
Because when we talk about knife crime, we include being found with a knife on the street.
Absolutely.
And do you agree with Kemi Badenoch, the Tory party leader? She's a big wide-ranging speech yesterday, but she was calling for more stop and search. And she, speaking as a black mother of black boys, because there is now this fear that, well, police are stopping more young black boys than they are young white boys as a percentage of, per capita of the population, ignoring the fact that you're talking about demographics of who is committing which crimes on the street, but also where people live. So, funnily enough, there isn't stop and search on the streets of a quiet lane in Devon or in the Lake District, but there is stop and searches in inner city areas where there is a high crime rate. And that is where, I'm afraid, the vast majority of young black men live. They live in inner city areas, particularly in London. Those are the demographics. There's a lot of willful dishonesty about why young black boys are being stopped, isn't there?
So now, statistics are racist. I was on a robbery squad for 6 to 8 years in London, and what I did is I followed the statistics. And if 70% of robberies, gun crime, knife crime, murders are committed by young black males.
Yep.
Do we stop 50% white and 50% black just to appease the anti-police aggressors, or do we actually do the job that the public expect? And if 7 out of 10 murders, stabbings, shootings, knife crime, robberies and street crime, which is often very violent, is committed by young black males, surely 7 out of 10 should be stopped. But nobody ever says it. Everyone is frightened. But the genie is out of the bottle now. The public see that the police have had the shackles and handcuffs put on them through fear of challenging people at the Manchester Arena, in Nottingham, in all of these other areas. And the time has come for a proper grown-up conversation. Do we have serious issues in Britain, and do we have serious issues in certain areas in Britain with the black community? We do. They're always the first to complain about us stopping and searching, but many of them are the victims, and their children are lying in mortuaries.
Actually, an awful lot of the mothers are the ones who actually want more stop and search because they know it keeps their sons safe. But it's interesting. We're talking about that particular issue, crime policing issue, but we're also and we started off talking about what's been happening in terms of these violent protests, these riots, basically on the streets of Belfast. But the thing is, the thing both these stories have in common is this feeling that we're constantly being told not to believe. Not believe what we see with our eyes and what we hear with our ears, that we're constantly told that what we can see in our own streets, what we can see in terms of the media, in terms of who is committing crime, where our problems are, and being told you must unsee this. It hasn't happened. Like sort of someone trying to sort of perform a magic trick on us and saying to admit that you can see things and you can state these facts is somehow bigoted.
Julia, you and I have known each other probably 25, 30 years. I was a serving police officer back then, and I think you may have been with the Express Group. You contacted me once or twice. 35, 37 years ago, as a serving police officer, and I say it so often, I spoke to you. I told you how bad crime was, and I also predicted how much worse it will get. The thing was, Julia, nobody listened, nobody acted, and it's got far worse. And the question we've got to ask ourselves today, and perhaps we'll finish off on it, is this: will anything ever change in Britain for the better to protect society, keep our borders safe and keep our streets safe? We've got a government that are lost, a criminal justice system that's in chaos, and a police service which sadly, and I'm an independent spokesman and was part of it for 31 years, is not fit for purpose. What does that tell us about 2026?
Yeah, absolutely. Norma Brennan, you've been very wise many, many times over the years and always correct. Former police officer Norma Brennan there. Benedict Spence. I mean, look, we covered other issues of crime, but it does all tie in because everything comes down to, sorry, don't believe the actual facts on the streets. We're constantly, crime's going down. When you say, look at this horrible crime, allegedly perpetrated by this migrant, or the ones that we've seen convictions already. No, there are plenty of horrible people committing crimes here. The Muslim Pakistani grooming gangs. Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs. Oh well, no, but more paedophiles in Britain are just white men from Britain. So that's not a problem. It's almost like double-think these people.
It is. I mean, if you were to read the Times of an afternoon, you would think, no, everything's actually more or less fine. If anything, it's all getting better because their columnists insist that it is. And I just think one of the reasons why people feel, just listening to Norman Brennan right there, this is not somebody who's, sort of completely oblivious to how the world works. He knows exactly how it is. And the problem is when people like that are able to see the trajectory going one way, I really do feel great not animosity, but a sort of sense of unease about all of this, because if it's people at the coalface who see the direction of travel and they're saying up the chain, this is what's happening,
and everyone's ignoring them.
We're not. It's not just people on the street shouting. It's awful. These are people in the system or who were.
We've got a press conference right now in Northern Ireland. The Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, John Butcher, is there. Also, the Northern Ireland Secretary Hilary Benn. Hilary Benn has said that nothing can justify the disorder in Belfast. The Chief Constable has said that the violence on the streets setting fire was an act of self-harm. The Commissioner for Children and Young People, Chris Quinn, has said that those violent scenes were robbing children of their right to live in safety, saying no child should feel unsafe in their home or community or fear because of who they are, where they come from or how they are perceived, after some thugs went door to door looking, they say, for the foreigners, and children had to be taken to safety. I mean, again, horrific scenes. I don't think anyone could justify. And sorry, whoever those thugs are, you are not helping the case, which is the case of the vast majority of law-abiding, ordinary citizens who want to live in peace and safety, would never, ever, ever condone what you've done. And you actually undermine the cause that people have, because they're talking about you now instead of talking about the real problem that we want them to talk about. So well done. Well done. I hope you're pleased with yourself. I hope you're looking in the mirror. Still got your mask on. Still got your balaclava and your hoodie on. Yeah, well done. You just undermined it. Because we're talking about you and your thuggery and your disgusting behaviour last night, instead of what we should be talking about and what those politicians and people at that press conference should be talking about, which is the barbaric act taking place on the streets of Belfast, and lots of other barbaric acts we're seeing being, you know, either allegedly or already by people who were convicted of them, by migrants who have no right to be in this country. 11:49 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking more about this case. We're also going to get PMQs live at midday. Stay tuned for all of that. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:52 is the time. Benedict Spence still joining us. Also now joined on the line by Tom Jones. He's Deputy Online Editor at The Critic. He's a former member or Senior Fellow at the Centre for Migration Control. Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This horrific beheading, or attempted beheading, has absolutely shocked the nation. We were talking about it, not able to show the video, I think very rightly, online. We've always seen those images in the newspapers and the media, and many will have actually watched that video. Everyone's shocked by that. We've seen this violence on the streets of Belfast. Everyone's now talking about that. Now, there's an element, we've got a man who's now been charged with this attempted murder in court, Hadi Alodid. He's been named in court, as has the victim. We've got a few more details about the case. However, in terms of this case, a lot of people are also talking about how on earth this man, the suspect, was able to be in Belfast at all in the first place. Can you talk us through how somebody who's in Sudan goes to France, ends up in Dublin, gets a bus from Dublin, crosses the border and ends up claiming asylum in Northern Ireland? Why would he travel that far when he's gone through so many safe countries?
Well, he would travel so far for the same reason that channel migrants travel so far, which is basically we have a migrant settlement package that is much more generous than other countries in Europe. But the route by which he arrived is something called the Irish route, which basically in this case he's travelled from Sudan to Paris and then to Dublin before taking a bus to Belfast.
How did he get from Paris to Dublin? I've seen various different reports, whether it was by plane, or in which case how did he get on the plane, or by boat?
We don't know specifically in this case yet, but a lot of the time, actually, these migrants travel on false papers. In particular, so this guy came over in very early 2023, and at that route, at that point, the Irish route was seeing a lot more increased traffic, basically because of the Rwanda scheme. So basically, it was redirecting migrant flows away from the channel and into this so-called Irish route, and so we saw a lot more crossings on the Irish border.
Yeah, and of course this works both ways. Now we don't have it. There are no specific figures. The police and the government in Northern Ireland don't have it. The Home Office doesn't apparently compile them, which is weird because they must know how many people cross from Republic of Ireland to Northern Ireland, or indeed, as we've seen previously, the other way round over the Rwanda policy. How many actually doing that? But it's believed to be certainly in the hundreds every year.
Yes, I think that absolutely. I think that's probably a lower figure, but again, it's just a figure that we don't know.
Do the authorities know, or do they just not know either?
It's quite possible they don't know, because one of the things you learn about getting involved in asylum policy is simply that there are huge data sets that other countries collect that in Britain we don't bother with. Some insane reason, probably because if we collected the data, we might actually have to face up to the insane consequences of an insane migration policy.
I mean, and when Denmark, which seems to be a remarkably sane country on quite a lot of these issues, when they have collected the data, been very, very clear in terms of criminality of migrants from particular countries. Now, whenever you have a conversation about this, everyone on the left suddenly goes, oh, we've got our own criminals, we've got our own paedophiles, got our own brutal attempted murderers, we've got our own rapists. Why are you kicking up a fuss? And they always point to the skin colour. They're obsessed with skin colour. The rest of us aren't. We just want to have as few people who are violent, dangerous people in our country as possible, and we can't kick out the ones who are British, so we'd rather not open the doors to the ones who have no right to be here. Seems like a pretty sensible argument to me, but they always give that argument. But there is very clear data that suggests that migrants, particularly migrants who have come through illegal routes from particular countries, particular parts of the world, have a higher rate of criminality. And that's even allowing for the fact that the vast majority of crimes in this country are never actually prosecuted.
Yes, that's absolutely true. If you look at all the countries that collect data on this kind of thing, it does show the same thing. I think usually it shows in most countries that have a population of Albanians, they are usually the top. They're a slightly different grouping because mostly it's actually professional career criminals.
Organised criminals,
It's not quite comparing apples to apples. But yes, it's just data that we simply don't collect. I think in this case, it's very interesting that the police have released such an amount of detail so early on.
Although interestingly, they thought the man was Somalian at first. And you think, well, how did you think he was Somalian? He turns out to be Sudanese. You kind of got, it wasn't something that, reports were saying. The police put that information out, which makes you wonder.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of paperwork flying back and forth. But I think, the only reason really that the police have actually released this data in the first place is because basically these stories are now just going absolutely wild on social media every time they come out, and it's forcing the police to release details instead of doing what they'd quite like to do, which is not release any details in order to keep a lid on the community tensions that we're seeing now.
Yeah, and again, people being angry about this is then seen as the problem as opposed to the actual substantive problem, which is people coming into our countries who, in this case, allegedly committing violent crimes, whether rape, assault, you know, or other violence, attempted beheading in this alleged assault. I suppose in summary to this, it's just, you know, this man was in the country. We're told, you know, he's legally allowed in the country because he's been given a 5-year visa, leave to remain. But on what basis was he given that leave to remain? Do we know?
I believe he claimed asylum in this case. Obviously, you know, he'd already passed through France and Ireland and God knows how many countries to get to there. But yes, I believe he claimed asylum. You know, every day we wake up and we look at the newspapers and there's a fresh horror in the immigration system, and you know, you look at this violence in Belfast, you look at the violence earlier this month. It is genuinely hard to know how the police are expected to deal with this whilst migration crisis just rolls on.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you joining us. There's Tom Jones, Deputy Online Editor at The Critic. We'll hear more from Benedict Spence. We'll also have Peter Carball in the studio in just a couple of moments as well. We're going to be taking PMQs live. I mean, we predicted it wrong last week, but my goodness me, I would be incredibly surprised if this did not come up at Prime Minister's Questions. We've also got an urgent question on this issue after that as well. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Let's go live to the House of Commons.
Northern Ireland and other first responders and members of the public who responded with such bravery. And our thoughts are with the victim. But let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. The acts of violence and arson that followed are totally unjustified. This morning I spoke with the First Minister, the Deputy First Minister and the Chief Constable. And the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is meeting leaders in Belfast today. We are united in calling for calm and determined to restore order, support the police and all those on the front line, and ensure that justice is done. On a lighter note, Mr. Speaker, as the World Cup gets underway, I'd like to wish the best of luck to both Scotland and England. And I too would like to wish you happy birthday. Mr Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministers.
OK, let's just come back of PMQs. We just had that. We wanted to go live to the Prime Minister giving a statement, as we'd expected he would. We'll have one or two questions from backbench MPs until then. In fact, if we can keep it on the screen for people, that would be very helpful. And I promise we will go live back to PMQs when Kemi Badenoch speaks. I'm also expecting questions from some other key figures as well. Joining me, I'm delighted to say, in the studio still is Conservative commentator Benedict Spence, and also we're joined by Peter Cardwell, also of this parish. Good afternoon to you, and a belated happy birthday for last Thursday. He took the whole week off for his birthday.
Had to be done.
Well, had to be done. And why not? I do a whole month.
You're only 42 once.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big birthday. It's a big birthday. Look, there's no doubt at all. This is, going to be a very serious day at PMQs. We've predicted it wrong before, though, haven't we? In terms of what do we think people are going to talk about at PMQs? Because we have got a case now with the events in Northern Ireland, in Belfast in particular, overnight. We have now got, a man who has been charged with attempted murder. He's been named. He's appeared in Belfast court. So that obviously creates some limitations of what can be said, and politicians can often use that as an excuse not to speak about it. But I think it would be untenable for this not to be talked about at PMQs.
You're absolutely right. There's also the fact that those riots that happened last night, and peaceful protests too, need to be discussed. There's no doubt about that, and they may have been sparked by what happened yesterday, but there are 2 days ago. But there are a huge number of factors in those demonstrations as well. Yeah. So I do think that's important.
Absolutely. I know that Kemi Badenoch is going to be speaking in just a couple of moments. So Benedict, we'll come back to you in just a couple of moments. We've been talking an awful lot about basically, how serious this is. We'll go live to the House of Commons. Kemi Badenoch.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Mr Speaker, can I also wish England and Scotland the very best in the World Cup? Can I wish you a very happy birthday, Mr Speaker, many happy returns. And may I take the opportunity to associate myself with the remarks that the Prime Minister made about the helicopter crash. Our condolences to their family and, of course, to the family of Michael Storey as well. Can I also thank him for his short statement on Belfast? The scenes in Belfast are deeply, deeply disturbing. A man is in hospital after a brutal attack, and now families are frightened after a night of violence. There is a live criminal case, so we must be careful about what we say. But we can be clear about this. People have a right to be angry. I am angry. And people have the right to expect their politicians to secure our borders. But no one has a right to burn families out of their homes or to burn public property and attack the police. We all have a duty to stand up for public safety in every way. Mr. Speaker, last night, America carried out strikes on Iran in response to the downing of a US helicopter. This comes just days after renewed attacks on Ukraine. The world is getting more dangerous, and the British public want to know this government is doing everything it can to protect our national security. So can the Prime Minister tell the House, will the full defence investment plan finally be published this week?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, can I agree with her that in relation to both Iran and Ukraine, we're facing a more volatile world than at any time during our lifetimes. Mr Speaker, so far as defence is concerned, we've already taken a number of measures. We've increased defence spending from 2.3% to 2.6% in 2027. That's spending £270 billion over this Parliament. We've carried out a strategic review of defence, and we're committed to publishing the Defence Investment Plan before the NATO summit, which is in just a few weeks' time.
That sounded like a no, Mr Speaker. We have wasted 2 years waiting for the Defence Investment Plan. Projects have been put on hold, and Britain is getting weaker with every passing day. It has been reported that the Chief of the Defence Staff told the Prime Minister that the Ministry of Defence needs an extra £28 billion. Will that requirement be met in full?
Mr Speaker, we'll set out the Defence Investment Plan. It is the it's a defence It's a 10-year plan, and it's the first line-by-line review of defence budgets in 18 years. She's wrong to say it's been delayed by 2 years, Mr. Speaker. The Defence Strategic Review was published a year ago. We've been working through the details to make sure that we get this right. We are the government that has increased defence spending from 2.3 to 2.6%. I remind the party opposite, when they came into power, defence spending was 2.5%, and they took it down to 2.3%. We've taken it up to 2.6%. The defence investment, by 2027, the defence investment plan will be published before NATO. We've already signed 1,400 major defence contracts. 94% of those, Mr. Speaker, are with British businesses. And as the Defence Secretary said, that includes helicopters made in Yeovil, drones in Swindon, armoured vehicles in Telford. And we've also given our armed forces the biggest pay rise in over 20 years. That's Labour making investment to safeguard our national security.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the pay rise for the armed forces? But the Prime Minister says he's increased defence spending. He's not. This year, he's cutting it by £3.5 billion. What he's talking about is hopeful increases, which we don't know if he will do because there is still no defence investment plan. At a time that we need leadership, Mr. Speaker, we have total paralysis. It is reported that the Chancellor is only willing to find £13 billion for the dip. At the London Defence Conference last year, the Prime Minister said defence would be the central organising principle of his government. How can that be the case when he's giving the armed forces less than half of the minimum that they need?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we've already increased defence spend. We will spend £270 billion in this Parliament. What did they do on spend? They took it from 2.5% and they cut it to 2.3%. And we'll take no lectures from them. They sat at the heart of a government that failed our armed services. They cut frigates and destroyers by 25%. They cut mine hunters by 50%. They cut the army from 100,000 down to 72,000. They missed army recruitment targets every single year for 14 years. And they left morale in the armed forces at an all-time low. So we'll take no lectures from them on defence and security of our country.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard him say this about 100 times. There is still no defence investment plan. He is the Prime Minister now, at least I think he is. Should I be calling Andy Burnham instead to ask these questions? He is the Prime Minister, and the reason that he's dithering is because he doesn't know where the money is coming from. The military is waiting, the bond markets are watching. He has only three options: cutting spending, more borrowing, or higher taxes. We know that the Chancellor wants to put up tax to pay for it. Will the Prime Minister rule out raising taxes?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, she asked the House to simply ignore the last 14 years under one. So we may have failed the armed forces, hollowed them out, but please just forget all that and act as if it didn't happen. Well, you can't forget all that, given the damage they did to our armed services. Mr. Speaker, she says forget all that. I remind the House, when they left office, 47 out of 49 major defence contracts were delayed or over budget. That is what we are fixing. And you can't just scrub away and forget. I know they want to forget the last 14 years in power. So do the British public. That's why they're sitting over there. But, Mr. Speaker, we've increased defence spending. We are going to publish the defence investment plan, and that will be done before the NATO summit coming up in just a few weeks' time.
Mr. Speaker, I remember when the last government led Europe when we were fighting the war in Ukraine. When Russia invaded, we were ready. We supplied Ukraine with munitions. We increased defence spending. But I wasn't asking him about our record. I asked him if he would rule out tax rises. He did not rule out raising taxes. So tax rises are coming. He can't borrow more because the markets have no confidence in him. The reason the Prime Minister is in this mess is because he maxed out on spending in his first two budgets. That's why the benefits bill is set to rise to over £200 billion by the end of the decade. He has things the wrong way round, Mr. Speaker. He has a benefits plan until 2031, but no defence investment plan. Why not just cut welfare?
Mr. Speaker, she talks of leading the way on Ukraine, and I did pay tribute and do to what the last government did on Ukraine, and we stood with them. We continue to lead the way because it's the United Kingdom and France that are leading the coalition of the willing that have got the military plans together for security guarantees in Ukraine. Equally in Iran, Mr. Speaker, it is the UK government and the French government that have put together the coalition for the reassurance military plans as soon as the Strait of Hormuz is open. That is what we're doing to lead. But, Mr. Speaker, we are not going to take lectures on defence from the party opposite after what they did to the armed forces, and nor are we going to take lectures on the economy, which they crashed and we've had to pick up.
Come on. Mr. Speaker, at a time of increased global instability and tension, war in Europe and the Middle East, he is paralysed, giving the armed forces less than half of the minimum that they need. Tony Blair says cut welfare for defence. Lord Robertson, former NATO Secretary-General, he's one of them, says cut welfare for defence. We all know why he won't cut welfare. It's because he is too weak. Too weak to make a decision, too weak to face down his backbenchers and cut benefits, too weak to stand up for our national security. As the sun sets on his premiership, he is scrabbling around for a legacy. But isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that the real legacy will be a bloated welfare state and a weaker armed forces?
Mr. Speaker, when they were in office, they didn't reform welfare or invest in our armed services. So the very choice she puts up, they did. Defence spending went down, welfare spending went up £88 billion overall on their watch, £33 billion under the shadow chancellor. So, Mr. Speaker, they did neither welfare reform nor did they spend our armed forces. And every week she reminds us why the British public sent them packing, because she ignores what we're turning the country around. Growth is up. She doesn't want to talk about that. Interest rates are down. She doesn't want to talk about that. Immigration is down after she cheerleaded for it to go up, and the NHS waiting lists have coming down to the fastest rate for 17 years. I'm going to keep fighting for the people who elected a Labour government and sent us here 2 years ago. People who want to live in a safer world. Parents who want to have a better future for their children, and young people growing up in poverty who deserve a better future. We're investing in this great nation, standing up against those that divide us, a stronger, fairer Britain.
Well, I'm pretty sure that Keir Starmer ends every single one of his 6 answers to Kemi Badenoch at PMQs with those words. I'm pretty sure that is the outline every single time. Look, PMQs is continuing. We understand that Richard Tice, among others, got questions. We've got someone listening in. As soon as we get to that, we will bring that to you live. But as always, we are taught the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. If you're just tuning in, no, you're not watching, BBC Two, taking in all the PMQs. Joining me in the studio still is Benedict Spence and also Peter Cardwell as well, discussing this now. As I said, we often get it wrong. We predict there's no way that the issue of what happened in Belfast overnight and this brutal attempted murder would not be coming up in conversation. But, of course, with the case being sub judice now, with the charge being brought, appearance in court, that does limit it. Kemi Badenoch, Prime Minister made initial statements. Kemi Badenoch made initial statements. Just on this, although moved on to the defence issue, but coming to you first, Benedict, Kemi Badenoch said, people have a right to be angry in relation to that attempted beheading. I'm angry, but no one has a right to burn families out of their homes. Yes. But this is the issue, isn't it? Once again, we talk about the reaction to a horrific crime rather than the causes. We look at the outcome of that horrific crime rather than the causes of that horrific crime.
Yes, and actually I think that the causes of this horrific crime has partly, informed why it is that Kemi Badenoch, having made the statement, then went off at a tangent to talk about something that is almost completely different, but not entirely. Yeah. Because, of course, she can't sit there and say, it's all your fault, Keir Starmer, because, of course, we know that this particular Hadi Alodid entered the UK around 2023, when, of course, who was in government? Oh, well, don't ask too many questions about that.
Yeah.
So, obviously, she can't
Now, by the way, two Home Secretary and a Home Office, the Immigration Minister, both Conservatives who are now in reform.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, but that's nonetheless what will be thrown straight back at her. So it's a bit of a tricky one, really, for her to be on. And so you can see, therefore, she's pivoted to trying to talk about defence, because that is about security, broadly, a similar sort of thing. And these are not wrong, the things that she's saying, the questions that she's putting to the Prime Minister, but, you know, very much a carefully, let's not try and trap myself in an awkward situation here. Let's say the thing that has to be said, which is I condemn it, but let's not get too deep into the details of how it's happened.
Pretty deft of her to do so. Peter Carver, what did you make of that decision?
Well, the Brexit deal is also part of it too, in terms of the free movement of people between Dublin and Belfast, which was a factor here as well.
But I know you're Northern Irish and know Don's had more about this than me, but at the end of the day, this was free movement that guaranteed by the Good Friday Agreement. The Brexit deal had to basically continue to allow it to happen.
The freedom of people had been there since the 1920s in the Common Travel Area. But yes, you're right. The point, I suppose, is that this immigration loophole that some have been talking about, this backdoor immigration, is something that actually the Justice Minister in Northern Ireland, Naomi Long, and the Deputy First Minister, Emma Little-Pengelly, in recent weeks have been talking to the Home Office about, have been saying, we don't know who's coming in. You talk about the small boats and the Channel and Dover and all the rest of it. Actually, there's a very big border into Northern Ireland where some of this stuff is happening too. And this is a factor in all of what has happened in the last couple of days.
And it would appear that anyone could just, if you can get to Dublin, you get on the bus, go to Belfast, claim asylum, and then, I mean, February 2023, by September 2023, given a visa 5 years to stay.
Yeah, and that is a factor in this.
And a home and an income.
And I'm sure that will come up in the...
I wonder what is incentivising people to make it across that border,
Well,
Peter.
exactly.
It's an absolute mystery to all of us.
Well, indeed, and I'm sure that will come up in the urgent question that Claire Hanna, she's the leader of the SDLP, will say. But just on Benedict's point, and your point as well, in terms of these protests, we've got to remember that, yes, there were pockets of violence and there were things that happened that absolutely shouldn't have, but there are a lot of peaceful people, thousands of people. I spoke to someone last night, her 70-year-old mother, for the first time ever, not during the Troubles, not during anything that happened there, she never took part in anything there, but for the first time ever she was saying enough is enough in terms of what is happening, and their 70-year-old mother went out in the protest last night.
And again, people forget, you don't get so much coverage of peaceful protests. I remember being on, peaceful protest lockdown march, and we had a huge number of people across central London barely even mentioned on the news. If there'd been any trouble, it would have led the news for 3 days. You know how these things work. Kemi Badenoch did decide to talk about, we mentioned both Prime Minister and her mentioning the World Cup, of course, launching tomorrow. Our first match isn't until next week, either England or Scotland, depending when you're watching. But she did talk about defence. So all 6 questions were about defence, and basically this defence investment plan. It was fascinating defence for the Prime Minister, I thought, Benedict, when she said we've wasted 2 years waiting for this full defence investment plan. Will it be published this week? And Prime Minister's, there are 2 things he always says. We've increased spending on defence from 2.3% to 2.6%. In fact, they haven't already. It's supposed to happen by 2027. Kemi Badenoch rightly pointed out. This is not a party political matter. It's a matter of fact that actually defence spending has gone down this year by 3.5 billion. They've had to make cost savings. But his defence was, the strategic defence review was only a year ago. His defence is, we haven't waited 2 years. We've only waited a year, at a time when we have numerous conflicts, not just in Europe, but in the Middle East, and potential threats we're constantly told about. I mean, he was on the ropes, wasn't he?
Whilst the public are also being drip-fed the information we may have to prepare for being in a war within the foreseeable future, we've then got a government going, but, are we going to have the kit? Are we not? Oh, guess we're going to find out. And then, when he's actually pushed, he goes, but we're also using this to create jobs by building helicopters here and transport vehicles here. And of course, he landed on those 2 things, which are perhaps the biggest boondoggles of all of this, because everybody knows the Ajax troop support thing doesn't work. It deafens people. And everybody also knows what happens to helicopters now. They get knocked out of the air by drones.
Indeed.
Why on earth did he go for that?
I'm just going to interrupt because the leader of the DUP, Gavin Robertson, is asking a question. Let's go straight to him now.
In my constituency and in other parts of Northern Ireland require the strongest condemnation. It is impossible to share concerns about damage to our British values and then act in a way that tarnishes the very thing we should want to protect. The government's job, our collective job, is to act, to protect our country and to defend our borders. The Prime Minister knows that the man charged entered our country illegally. He passed through 2 safe countries and attained asylum in record time. Will he meet with me urgently to discuss the steps he and his government will take to ensure our values are enforced, that the rule of law in this country sustains, and that he protects and closes the open, porous border between our country and the Irish Republic?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Right Honourable Member? And can I particularly thank him and all leaders in Northern Ireland who have urged calm, particularly before what happened last night. I think in standing together with that common message was very powerful, and I thank him and others for what they did in that regard. I'm very happy to meet him and other MPs from Northern Ireland as he requests, and I think we've now identified a slot after Prime Minister's questions when we can do that. It is obviously important that we do at the first opportunity. We are all sickened by this attack. But the scenes of violence and disorder have no justification, and we need to be really clear about that. Of course, there are questions that need to be answered, but destroying communities, destroying homes and driving people out of their homes is not and will never be the right way to respond to an attack like this. And I look forward to working with him and others to ensure that we get the calm response and give the police the space that they need to deliver justice.
Right, let's just come back out from Prime Minister's questions there. That question from the DUP leader, the MP Gavin Robinson. Coming to you, Peter Cobwell. Interesting, what his final line was about, needing to close that open, porous border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Now, again, key part of the Good Friday Agreement there, and had to be one of the reasons why Northern Ireland is in this very strange no man's land over Brexit is because of the need to not have a border where your passport is checked when people going across that border. But nevertheless, that porous open border was used by, we know, a migrant who has now been charged with attempted murder over that brutal beheading attempt on Monday night. That they cross that border.
And the point is that people who have British or Irish passports shouldn't have any friction whatsoever. There shouldn't be any checks in terms of them getting across the border, because that's been the case since the 1920s. But there should be some way, as Gavin Robinson says, for others who don't have British or Irish passports to actually be checked. And I don't know how that works.
It doesn't seem to me to be remotely complicated or unreasonable. There was an idea where you can't have those men with their guns back on the border.
Yeah, we don't want that.
But
no one wants that.
Seems to, again, I don't... Look, as someone who travels quite frequently, as you know, I don't even object to things like, the European Union imposing those visa checks, wanting to know who we are. Good. I'm glad you want to know who I am. But could you provide enough customs officers and machines so there's not a long wait? I mean, this is a logistical issue and do you care about us as tourists? But I find it utterly bizarre that when I, as a law-abiding citizen with a British passport, when I travel to the last couple of journeys I've done to Spain and to Portugal, I'm standing in a queue for an hour to give my passport and get my fingerprints done. But this guy, by all accounts, can somehow travel to France, travel into the Republic of Ireland, get a bus, travel, and then into the Northern Ireland and into the UK jurisdiction and claim asylum. Why are you checking me and you're not checking him?
And if he travelled to London, it would have been a different story.
Yeah, I think ultimately this is probably going to upset quite a lot of Irish people in the Republic, but ultimately, again, a lot of this has to be based on trust. And if we can't trust a neighbour with whom we have a very specific agreement to enforce a certain part of the agreement, and that is to keep a better check on people, it doesn't matter if they turn around and say, well, that provision's not necessarily there for us to do, we're not allowed to. It has to be there, because ultimately, this is why, increasingly, this is why Britain has always had an interest in Ireland, because it poses a security threat, its very existence, if it decides to do things unilaterally, whilst there is still British territory on the island of Ireland.
I've got no time for certainly the people. I'm from half Southern Irish stock. I've got every time for anyone from Ireland. Not the governments in recent years. What they tried to do to try and stop us from enacting the democratic vote, just because they put up with the EU telling them how to vote in referendums, doesn't mean we have to. I think what the political class of Southern Ireland did, unforgivable, and forever unforgivable until that entire political class are gone from that country, and they're going to be there a very long time. So, I mean, I have no bag for them. But Peter, I mean, is that the issue? I mean, look, this guy when he's been charged with this as a suspect in this case, he could have got to the UK any other way.
In lots of different ways.
Because the point is, you can come in the back of a lorry, you can come on some sort of visa, get some false ID. You could, by the way, 500,000 people who've arrived from North Africa in Spain are about to be given full access to the EU and Spanish nationality, at which point they'll be able to travel to us. Let's go to the House of Commons now. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform's got a question.
This Prime Minister is in denial of the rising despair across the country over his failure to stop the boats and related criminality, his failure to recognise two-tier policing, his failures over Mandelson, his failures over the scourge of anti-Semitism. He's lost the confidence of the country, his own trade union members and his own very quiet backbenchers, Mr. Speaker. When will he do the right thing, and when will this Prime Minister resign?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, last week we had the terrible case of Henry Novak, which they sought to exploit. Now we have a very difficult situation in Northern Ireland where families and communities are extremely frightened. What do? They try to whip up fear and division, because that's all they've got. And he talks about stopping the boats. Mr. Speaker, when we passed legislation to help stop the boats, what did they do? They voted against it. And to take those measures, you need money. And he is still not properly addressed why his companies didn't just aggressively avoid tax, but failed to tax the tax that they legally earn. His investment company then gave huge donations to Reform. If he paid his tax with more money to deal with these issues.
Ivan Sampson.
Well, that's a little exchange there. Peter Cardwell, I mean, it's fascinating. Everyone's accusing everyone of playing politics. So was the Prime Minister there, quite clearly. Richard Tice very angry there, about the Prime Minister's lost confidence of the country and the people, and his own backbenchers, do the right thing now and resign. Now, he would have known that the Prime Minister was going to come back over the issues, over claims that Nigel Farage, I think completely false claims, had somehow tried to incite some protests issue over the Novak case, trying to whip up fear and division, he says now. Do you think this is justified?
And whipping up fear as well. Richard Tice shouting back rubbish at points. I know Sarah Pochin, the Reform Party MP this morning, talking about a Liberal Democrat accosting her about that particular issue.
Why is Reform Party responsible for people in masks thugs on the street of Belfast?
Also, the politicisation of the Henry Novak thing. Yeah. Well, who did that? The family came to Downing Street and they have every right to do that. But then they walked out at the front of Downing Street. Maybe they wanted to do that, but I think...
Kemi Baignock came in this studio having met them privately.
Yes, exactly.
Very different, I think.
And I rang Downing Street Press Office last Thursday and said, can you tell me about the meeting? When's it going to happen, etc.? They said it's a private meeting. Well, it wasn't that private.
No, indeed. And again, also, go to them rather than expecting them to come to you and having cameras of the world. Benedict, your thoughts?
Honestly, ultimately murder is political however it happens, and the way that the Prime Minister has used on the one hand saying, no, you absolutely can't discuss it because, that's what the family has said and it's going to stir up tensions, and on the other hand goes after Reform when they try to raise these things. Exactly.
Yeah. But also, by the way, Henry Novak, his father, Mark, never said don't discuss it.
No, it must be said, it's been very dishonestly reported by a lot of not just politicians but certain media commentators as well. But this is all part of the attempt to sort of stifle the discussion about it. You can't...
What you're allowed to feel, what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to do.
We all have access to social media now. Even if every media company turned around and said, well, we're not going to talk about it because it might stoke division, it's still going to happen. People are still going to find out about it.
Absolutely. Again, people talking about it, people reacting to it is not the problem. The problem is the brutality itself. Once again. Big thanks to Peter Cardwell. Back on air tonight.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. Tune in. Peter Cardwell tonight. Benedict Spence, we're back on air in a couple of seconds with me, and we're taking your calls as well. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, number to get in touch. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:34 is the time. Let's go straight to a call. Alan's on the line in Aberdeen. Alan, what do you want to say about this horrific attack and indeed, of course, the protests last night and indeed the political reaction?
Hi, Julie. My thoughts are with the victim and his family and the people that stepped in. Yeah. Hats off, that's bravery. This is another attack. How many Manchester arenas, how many grooming gang victims, how many rapes, how many 7-7s, Lee Rigby's, Sir David Amos, now Belfast? How many of them do we need before the political elite, the mainstream media, the liberal left wake up to what the actual problem is?
Yeah. I think you'll find the problem is us talking about it, Alan. Did you not get the memo?
Oh, trust me, I got that long ago, Julie. We're not allowed to talk about the problem. They think and you know what the worst of it is? The people who are screaming against the riots, which we all condemn, however, them very same people, do you ever see the same condemnation against the riots from them people against grooming gangs, against the invasion, against Manchester, against all the crimes that in the third world? We know what the problem is in Britain. We know who the problem is. It's not only the third world and their 1,400-year-old ideology, but it's the bloody political elites, the mainstream media. They are part of
I agree. Again, every time you should go going back to the terror attacks, we like to think of them in the past. No, they're not in the past. They're more being foiled every single day. And they only have to be lucky once, as the IRA so famously said. We have to be lucky every time. But at the end of the day, every single time we're told, community cohesion, be concerned about this. We don't want people to take action to their own hands. And while, of course, we do not want anyone, I don't want people ever, what happened last night in Northern Ireland was absolutely outrageous and in no way helps the cause of people like you and me and millions of others, the majority of people in this country who would like the actual real cause behind this to be dealt with. But at the end of the day, they seem to be so much more angry about the reaction than about the barbarity which provokes that reaction.
I totally agree with you, Julie. I mean, I deal directly with victims of actual genocide. So, I know about the barbarity. However, what I'm seeing now in Britain is we've got a ticking time bomb. What you see as went on abroad, we've got a 7th of October, we've got a Bondi Beach, we've got a Yazidi genocide here in Britain now, because we're dealing with people who think and plan 2, 3, 4 generations ahead. We are dealing with people who hate us. Let's be honest about it.
But again, I have to say this because if I don't, people begin. But I don't think genuinely that the majority of people who've come from a lot of these countries thinks about anything other than just getting on with their own family life, doing their jobs, whatever. I think there are people here who come here who are on the take. I think there are people who are taking the mick. I think there's a criminal element, and I think then you have this big, let's face it, terrorist stroke, serious criminal jihadi element. And I'm afraid that element is a minority, but it's a very, very large minority.
It is a large minority. And do you know what the worst of it is? That minority that's coming in, they breed. They're breeding the next generation.
Again, some people won't like that terminology, but the reality is if you look at the latest statistics, in fact, there was an item we've got it on the show before this case came out in terms of, looking at school pupils about what, where we are in terms of the demographics of this country and how much they are changing. Look, I'm going to have to leave it there because I'm, as always, way over time. Alan, really interesting call. Thank you very, very, very much indeed. And a lot of people will have been agreeing with an awful lot of that. I'm going to go to a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking to the wonderful, the brilliant Kate Hoey. Baroness Kate Hoey, of course, born and bred in Northern Ireland, to get her thoughts on this story. First up, though, of course, it all kicks off tomorrow. Yeah, the FIFA World Cup kicks off tomorrow, and our friends at talkSPORT, just down the corridor, are sending you and a friend straight to New York City with Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier. It's the ultimate trip to watch England face Panama live at the MetLife Stadium. Return flights, hotel, match tickets and spending money all taken care of, and I'm happy to be the friend. Plus, Adidas is throwing in the official try-on match ball and a fresh pair of boots. Don't miss out. Here's how to enter.
For your chance to win, head to our friends at talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close on the 12th of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksportwin.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:40 is the time. Let's get straight to my next guest. Baroness Kate Hoey is an independent peer and former Labour MP, and of course born and bred in Northern Ireland, where of course all the focus has been after this horrific, brutal attempted murder on Monday night, and of course these protests we saw turning horrifically violent last night. Kate Hoey, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Nice to see you.
Well, I wish it was under nicer circumstances. I was just asking first, your reaction to what has happened in Belfast in the last couple of days.
Well, I travelled back through Belfast Airport yesterday, coming back to London, and there was almost an atmosphere of just shock and horror at what had happened the night before, and anger, But most people are angry, but don't actually come out on the streets. Yeah. And then we saw, I feel it was almost inevitable. But what is sad is that the people who are taking part in it, many of them just have no understanding of just how the message this sends across the whole UK, never mind in Northern Ireland, and the damage it does, and the way it is completely then takes over from the real message, the message that needs to get out there, that this is just not acceptable, and the whole question of open borders and all of that. We need a real discussion, but I'm afraid that, those people who don't want to accept the truth about the damage that migration is causing, increased immigration and all of that to communities, just seize on the violence as a way of not talking about the real issue.
Exactly. They talk about the consequences, not the causes. And again, all of us would condemn the violence, absolutely. And again, what is fascinating, though, is I sort of wonder sometimes when you get the Prime Minister talking about people playing politics and exploiting things. Yeah. The best case scenario for Keir Starmer and the left particularly, but again, whether it was the Tories in power or Labour in power, allowing this sort of mass, uncontrolled, illegal immigration, which is what it is, their best case scenario is that we don't know about these cases. Their second best scenario is that we're not allowed to talk about these cases. We don't have a video, we can't see it. And the third best scenario is there's a violent reaction to it, and then they can blame politicians on the right for that reaction. At no point having to actually confront the actual crime itself and why someone is allowed to be in the country who is able to be, allegedly commit a violent crime like this.
Well, I think this is why this case And this obscenity that took place is really, I think, could be a game changer, because it is showing very, very clearly that someone can just simply come through two safe countries, get into the Republic of Ireland, which is a foreign independent country, and then just literally come over in a bus, come over in a train to the United Kingdom, where they know that they will then be given asylum or leave to remain very, very quickly. They'll be given lots of extra benefits that they don't get in the Republic of Ireland or in the EU.
I thought the Republic was pretty soft touch as well.
Well, they don't give as much support as we do in terms of someone, but there's no doubt about it that in the Republic of Ireland there is growing unrest, and that we saw last year some of the riots and the demonstrations that took place there, because no one has asked communities, do they want hundreds of different nationalities, particularly coming from countries where their whole culture and moral values are very different from ours, to be put into their own towns. We saw that in Ballymena last year. And no one listens. So I really hope that this time, the question of the open border has to be addressed.
Well, how does that get addressed? Because that just came up in PMQs. Because such a crucial part of the Good Friday Agreement was there was this open border between the Republic and Northern Ireland.
No, I think that's always the myth. The Good Friday Agreement talked about getting rid of the military structures that were there at the border.
Soldiers standing at checkpoints.
Who were there, and all cars didn't automatically get stopped, but there was a lot of stopping, and there were structures there, and there was people with guns, and all of that went with it. But it didn't talk about any kind of border either on trade or on people. It didn't say that we couldn't actually check people. And the Republic of Ireland, of course, has been doing that quite recently over the last 2 years, getting onto a bus and asking people for their IDs once you get into the Republic of Ireland. Because at the time when Rwanda was being discussed, a lot of migrants left Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom and went into the Republic. So the Irish government acted very quickly. Now, I've had lots of questions to ministers over the past 2 years. In fact, the first lot was to Lord Sharp, who was the Home Office Minister in the Conservative government, and then more recently, last autumn, to David Hanson, precisely about this, about the figures, the numbers. Neither of them could give me the results, the details of figures. And all they would say, the two answers were almost identical. It didn't make any difference whether you were a Labour Home Office Minister or a Conservative. Oh, we're in discussions with the Republic of Ireland government. We have very good relations, blah, blah, blah. Nothing, no real recognition that the numbers coming over that border are huge.
And again, it's very, very noticeable. I can see the people coming out of my local Holiday Inn, asylum hotel at the top of my road. But you can notice it in a big city. It's very noticeable. But it's even more noticeable in lots of small towns and villages. This is happening both in Northern Ireland and also in the Republic of Ireland, where literally people are shipped in. And it's happened in Essex, didn't it? In that former military camp. They ship people in overnight. Why are they doing it overnight? Because they know it's against the wishes of the local people.
Yes, absolutely. And they're never consulted. Yeah. And this what really makes me angry is this whole way that everything is then blamed on the far right. It's kind of somehow
just going to come to that.
The great excuse for everything. And I was saying to someone earlier this morning, a lot of those, particularly those young people who were out on the streets, being involved in that violence, wouldn't have a clue what we meant by the far right. Yeah. It isn't.
Well, they certainly wouldn't have a clue who Nigel Farage was. I mean, it's fascinating how quick the left commentariat, how quick, Keir Starmer was quick in response to Richard Tice over a question, the Deputy Leader of Reform. Very quick. Same over the Henry Novak case. Very, very different issue last week. But really, really quick to it's people talking about it, it's people predicting that, telling people they should be angry about it when they already are, predicting that there can be trouble about it. They somehow are then held responsible when the thing that everyone thinks is going to happen happens.
Yes. You see, people have felt silenced. We know that. I mean, politicians have felt silence even. I mean, it's beginning to change now, but there was a time when it really was quite difficult to even talk about immigration, because that was immediately seen as somehow you were a racist. And that is beginning to change. But the public, when they do feel frustrated and angry, sadly, what we've seen on the streets, does happen. But I mean, it has to be condemned, and it's just so short-sighted. And any leaders that there are, and any parents that have allowed their children to be out on the streets, really need their head examining.
Stay at home, absolutely. Just finally, I want to ask you, front page of the Sun has actually got a picture of this guy, because we found out today the name of this Sudanese alleged attempted murderer, Hadi Alodid, but also confirmed the name of the victim as Stephen Ogilvie, an NHS radiographer. We've also found out who the incredible, hero passerby was, who basically went in, and again, I'd not heard of it. This my own ignorance, a hurling stick. I said it was some kind of bat, but this is Matt McKinnon. He's pictured on the front page of the Sun, and he basically was in a car, and he got out, and he'd been playing hurling, what did you do with hurling? Using a hurling stick. He had it in the boot of the car. He got out and smashed the attacker over their head, and we all saw on the video. But, we always need to remember that the police are very brave. They run into these things. Ordinary civilians, ordinary people stepping in, literally saving lives.
Yes, well, this man certainly saved, I'm sure, the life, or certainly even more serious injuries. And the hurley stick is like a cricket bat, but wider, so it's quite got a heavy. I mean, it was a very, very good idea of him to get it out of the boot.
Might start carrying one.
But it's brave people. There are brave people, and there is an instinct, isn't there, to help someone when they're in trouble. But I just hope that we're not going to go on with another few days of everyone sort of talking about, the violence obviously has to be condemned, but actually starting to look at what we are going to do about keeping our borders safe.
Yeah, why don't we just prevent us ever having to talk about it again by it not happening? Kate Hoey, you've been talking sense on this for years, and I know my audience would appreciate you. Independent peer, former Labour MP Baroness Kate Hoey. Benedict Spence still in the studio?
You're of Irish origin, aren't you?
Half Irish.
Could you culturally get away with carrying a hurling stick in the street?
Who knows?
Who knows? Look into that.
Not allowed pepper spray, but hurling stick seems very enticing right now.
It's a great sport for anybody who's not watched it. The All-Ireland final will be on the BBC.
I apologise for my ignorance on this issue. I kept saying it was some kind of bat yesterday, and I can imagine there were people throwing things at the radio.
That's one way of describing it, yes.
Well,
quite a large bat.
I'm not very good on the sportage.
It's got great velocity when you really get to it.
Listen, I've been learning how to play golf. I still call it a stick, much to the horror of my family. Anyway, 12:50 is time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be talking about a small matter. It came up at PMQs. The matter of defence. Do we have any defence? Are we going to spend any money on defence, and what happened overnight in Iran? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 12:53 is the time. Let's go straight to my next guest, Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. He's also Reform UK's Chief Advisor on Global Affairs. But Alan, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we're talking to you about, well, defence issues rather than anything to do with the Reform Party. You're an advisor rather than a spokesman for them, I must stress to people. Defence came up in PMQ's questions from Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, in terms of this strategic defence, strategic investment plan. Prime Minister saying it's going to happen in the next few weeks, but we've already waited a year for it. But we are in desperate need of that plan, are we not? Simply because we currently quite clearly do not have the defence we need.
Well, yes, we don't have the defence we need, that's obvious. We've discovered all sorts of disasters in recent weeks. We know all about the destroyers, problems with our destroyers. Our attack submarines have all been laid up. We've had a House of Commons committee telling us that our allies have noted how, lamentable our defence is. There's been a military readiness poll, not a poll, a sort of, kind of ranking done by NATO. Yep. Britain ranks 31 out of 32. Brilliant. Only Iceland ranks behind us. And Iceland has no army. So,
oh my God, that is
an interesting one. That's quite an extraordinary one. It was reported in the Times this morning. Absolutely extraordinary that we are in this situation as a country, and the reason we are in it is because we have no investment in defence that's been put out onto the table. So everyone's desperate for this plan. The government keeps on dragging its heels, and the reason, Julia, it's dragging its heels is it can't work out how much money it needs to spend and where the money's going to come from.
I mean, it was interesting. The Prime Minister kept saying, we've put up. I have to do the accent, the voice. We've gone up from 2.3% to 2.6% of GDP. Well, I mean, it's a load of rubbish because it hasn't actually happened yet. And there's been, as Kemi Badenoch pointed out, a £3.5 billion cut this year. But we spend, almost double servicing our debt, not paying off our debt, paying interest on our debt than we spend on actual defence, which is around the 60 billion mark. But we know that other countries like France, who spend similar amounts, get a lot more bang for their buck. So that's a big concern. But in terms of the reports, some of the reports today, including actually in the Times, I think the Telegraph as well, about how is any increase in defence going to be paid for, that is what the delay is, because they know you're looking at huge sums of money and you need to find that money from somewhere. And there is no money. We are borrowing at the absolute extreme. We can't afford to borrow anymore. People are being taxed to the hilt already, some of the highest tax we've ever seen. But the clear option to make anyone sane, and Tony Blair and George Robertson, the former NATO chief, making it very clear, is to cut welfare spending. But this is something the Prime Minister cannot do because of his backbenchers, in which case the question today was, how much are our taxes going to go up then?
Well, the whole point of this is the Prime Minister is in a desperate fight for his own survival within the Labour Party, and that is now playing out onto the national security architecture, the issues, because of his desperate need to placate his backbenchers, to keep them, perhaps to vote for him in whatever leadership contest may or may not emerge. The country's defence is being sacrificed. So everyone's aware, including former Labour grandees, who know exactly where the money has to come from cuts within government expenditure.
And everyone knows, really.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's this discussion about net zero cuts, all these things that have been spoken about. Everyone knows, and this has been trailed for a long time, Julia. We've been waiting for a year for this. And if you remember, the government's SDSR laid out what should be done, but we haven't been able to do any of it because there's no investment plan behind it. So everyone's been aware of this for a year. They've sort of fiddled while the country's defences continue to burn, and we're no wiser as to what the outcome's going to be. It is a deplorable state of affairs.
Well, the important thing is at least we haven't got a major war in Europe or ongoing or in the Middle East, and we haven't got an ongoing threat highlighted constantly by our security agencies and defence chiefs, past and present, of threats from Russia and China and other hostile actors. I mean, so we shouldn't have too much to worry about. I mean, I am, of course, using the sarcasm font. I mean, this is the terrifying thing. We can see the danger right now, and yet they're not acting. I mean, we needed to do this investment 10 years ago, 2 years ago, not in 10 years' time.
Of course. And in fact, I was about to say you've forgotten that the lion was clearly lying down with the lamb right now. I mean, that's the whole purpose. But no, we're in an era of, increasing threats, increasing danger to the UK. We have hot wars that are going on at the present. We know that the threat architecture and sort of assessment is going to get worse over the next 10 years rather than better, and we are not equipped right now to defend the nation. We urgently must have the investment because we need that for the country's security. The government is failing in its first task.
Which is indeed. And we certainly don't protect our borders, but we absolutely need to protect ourselves from hostile nation states. Dr. Alan Mendoza, really really good to get your thoughts on all of that. And of course, Benedict Spencer, don't even have time to sort of get on to what's going on around. I did find it fascinating, by the way, that Donald Trump, who had urged Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, not to react to missile attacks from Iran onto Israeli territory when there was an Apache helicopter downed in the Strait of Hormuz by Iran. Immediate retaliation. It's almost like there are different rules for different countries.
Yeah, odd that. And also, I think, frankly, it tells you just how close we are actually to getting a deal. Trump sort of sat there going, don't worry, we could get a deal done. And you got Rubio saying it could be done in a matter of days, just as long as you stop shooting at each other and then, working really well.
There is no deal that is supposed to be done. Just some more breaking news we've had from the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, speaking in the House of Commons. An urgent question going on there about events in Belfast. 3 arrests have been made following disorder in Northern Ireland last night. He said that more will